Hello, everyone. Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as YUJI Itadori, Part 5. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Tengen had lived too long. 1,200 long years, watching generations of sorcerers come and go. First the parents, then their children, then their children's children, and so on. One of the founders of the Jujutsu sorcerers as they are known today. An immortal being with incomparable knowledge, a wealth of wisdom so vast it could be mistaken for limitless. And yet, Tengen still had to rely on others for her own safety. Of course, she was responsible for maintaining the barriers of the Jujutsu territories and served as a sage for generations of sorcerers. But when faced with a real threat, what could she do? Her usefulness, her abilities as a sorcerer, at that moment, were being tested. Only to show how incapable she was alone. Without the Six Eyes user, she was defenseless, a negligence on her part for believing she would always have someone to protect her. A mistake. The same mistake as not accepting to merge with a weaker vessel. In the end, even though she was immortal, she was still technically human, or at least, she had been once. The consequences of her errors would eventually catch up with her. But the blame shouldn't fall entirely on her. After countless years, it would be normal for anyone to simply believe fate would guide them. Or maybe she was just an old woman trying to justify her own mistakes. In the end, it no longer mattered. The problems were already knocking at the door, and she had to act to solve them. That's why, the moment she felt YUJI Itadori's presence in the tomb, it was as if a light appeared at the end of the tunnel. Not just for the threat of Kenjaku, but also for her own problems. An abnormally powerful soul, a trait never before seen. A rare technique, powerful enough to eventually surpass all others. And above all, an unshakable will. Tengen could feel that in the boy. She could see Itadori as hope. Tengen hadn't realized it until she saw him, but he was exactly what she had been waiting for. Tengen's strength lay in her barrier techniques, not in combat. But if Itadori devoured her, that would change. With him inheriting her technique, the barriers would experience some instability, but it would only be a matter of time before the boy got the hang of it. He was talented, Tengen had seen that. After 1,200 years of overseeing the Jujutsu world. Perhaps he hadn't realized it when she asked him to devour her, but she was passing the torch to the boy. It might be an enormous weight for a 15-year-old boy, but he would learn to bear it. Selfish of her, certainly. But she was just an old woman, tired of her responsibilities. What a rude old lady, didn't even say goodbye. Hey, there's Itadori. Yuta was the first to spot him, quickly alerting the group, who turned to see the boy. Hey, guys. Itadori waved as he approached. How are you? Megumi and Nobara approached him, clearly worried since his disappearance. I'm fine. Tengen-sama just wanted to warn me about Sukuna, Itadori lied, and when he felt the King of Curses wanting to speak up, he simply shrugged it off. Yuki raised an eyebrow at that. She sensed there was more to the boy's disappearance but decided to let it slide for now. With her and Choso staying behind to protect the hermit, she would have time to understand why Tengen wanted to speak with Itadori alone. Anyway, Tengen-sama already told me everything about the Cullen game, but she didn't tell me what you guys decided about who's doing what. Itadori turned to Yuki. But instead of Yuki, Maki took the reins. Yuta will enter a colony to gather information before Tsumaki and Megumi enter the game. Yuki and Choso will stay to protect Tengen-sama. Pointing toward Nobara and Megumi, she continued, Megumi, Nobara, and Tadu will find Kinji Hikari, a third-year student who's currently suspended. We might have a decent number of people, but he's really strong, so we need him. His strength depends on how excited he is, but when he's in action, he's stronger than I am, Yuta said with a bit of admiration. But upon hearing that, Itadori and Maki just stared at him in silence. Moving on, after Naoya's attack on Megumi, we agreed it would be best if you and I, Itadori, went in search of the Zenin clan's cursed weapons, Maki continued. In the worst-case scenario, you can get us out of there. Itadori nodded, not disliking any part of the plan. In fact, it aligned perfectly with what he intended to do. If the events in the Zenin clan remained the same, today would be the day. The Zenin clan would be reborn. Well, if that's all, then let's not waste any more time. Itadori waved for them to move, and the group headed out of the tomb. But before Itadori could go further, he stopped. Hey, Choso. Turning to see his brother standing beside Yuki, he smiled. Take care until I come back. Choso smiled back, tears welling up in the corners of his eyes. You too, Yuji. With the group finally disappearing, Yuki watched Choso hold back his tears with an empathetic smile. Behind them, Tengen remained silent. With the group outside the tomb, Itadori turned to Megumi and Nobara. Hey, be careful. I don't want to have to save your butts. Megumi just shrugged, while Nobara lightly punched his arm. We could say the same to you, and besides. Nobara leaned in, raising her eyebrows suggestively as she nudged him with her elbow. Keep your girl safe. Shut up, Itadori retorted at her attempt to embarrass him. What? You're gonna tell me you guys just trained while we were gone? Yes, that's exactly what happened. Sure. Whatever you say, man. Itadori shook his head in defeat, turning and walking away from the group. See you later. Nobara waved as she left with Megumi. Itadori watched as Megumi seemed quiet. He understood. The situation with Tsumaki was delicate, and he didn't want to waste any more time than necessary, but he would need to be strong for what was to come. As much as Itadori would do anything to prevent Tsumaki's death, Megumi would still need to remain strong when he learned it wasn't his sister possessing her body. The last thing they needed was for Megumi to fall into despair. Hey, let's go. Blinking when he noticed Maki calling him, Itadori nodded as he turned to follow her. So, going back home? I never saw that place as my home. Fair. Itadori nodded. Well, on the bright side. He tried to find a positive way to view the situation, but his silence soon betrayed the fact that he hadn't come up with anything. On the bright side, we're gonna take the cursed weapons from those idiots. To his surprise, Maki finished his thought for him. That made him stare at her in slight amazement before a smile spread across his face. Yeah, it's great that you're seeing the bright side of this. Shut up. Itadori let out a laugh. How was your life before joining Jujutsu school? As Itadori walked beside Maki, he couldn't help but ask. With the silence that stretched between them during the walk, he felt compelled to ease the tension with some conversation. Over the past month, he and Maki had quickly grown closer. Maki might have seemed cold on the outside, but she really had a pleasant side, especially when they talked between trading blows. The pursuit of strength also helped in building their bond. Itadori was drawn as much to her willpower as to her abilities. Eventually, after so much interaction, he found himself interested in her. Admiration? A small crush? Honestly, Itadori couldn't say, or didn't want to. In his past life, he had been a grown man with a beautiful wife and plans to start a family. He wouldn't lie to himself by saying he wasn't attracted to Maki. He liked her, and if circumstances were different, he wouldn't mind making a move. But things were a little too complicated. He hadn't broken up with his wife, but rather, he had been forcibly taken from her. When Itadori first met Maki, he saw her simply as someone who shared a similar ambition to his own. But through their conversations, he soon noticed how similar she was to his wife. And he felt guilty for being drawn to that. His blurred memories, which had dulled his feelings, only made Itadori more depressed. He could say that he once loved his wife with all his heart, but now, only the feeling of gratitude for her having been by his side remained. Was that enough? Could that be enough for the woman he had left behind? Itadori didn't have an answer for that, and he doubted he ever would. He didn't know about his wife, but Itadori hoped she could move on. If possible, he wanted to see her happy, even after his disappearance. And just as he wanted her to move on, he also needed to take a step forward. One day he may have been Mark, and his life experiences would always be with him, but as painful as it was to say this, his past no longer mattered. He was now Yuji Itadori, a completely different person, walking a completely different path. If he couldn't accept the simple fact of being attracted to someone else, then he would never be able to move forward. What do you mean? Maki raised an eyebrow at his question. I mean, what was your childhood like with the Zenin clan? Maki nodded in understanding, her lips tightening as memories of her time with the cursed clan came to her. It wasn't pleasant at all. The Zenin clan had done nothing for her or her sister. Maki grew up in an environment where she was groomed to serve others. Targeted from childhood to be the future wife of some idiot from the clan. Her wishes were never respected, she was nothing more than an object. When Maki showed determination, Naobito gave her a chance, but her lack of talent with cursed energy quickly lost his interest. That's why she decided to leave. She wanted to return one day and show the clan that even she could become stronger. That way, maybe she could make things better for her sister. They never gave me anything. In fact, I don't miss that place at all, she spoke with disgust in her voice. Itadori nodded. Well, you must remember at least one good thing. Maki remained silent, her eyes shining as a pleasant memory came to mind. Memories of having fun with her sister a long time ago. Yes. And with a small smile forming on her lips, she answered, when we were kids, Mai and I had fun. I think those were the only good memories from that place. You seem to care about your sister a lot, Itadori pointed out. We're not on good terms, but... Pausing for a moment, she seemed to think about her next words. One of the reasons I do what I do is so I can make space for Mai. Blinking when she noticed Itadori quietly watching her, Maki shook her head, shaking off the memories of her past as a sigh escaped her lips, realizing she had said too much. Anyway, what about you? You never talk about your childhood. She quickly changed the subject. Itadori rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Previously, he had been able to separate what belonged to Mark's memories and what belonged to Itadori's, but by this point, childhood memories were too mixed for him to distinguish. He remembered playing with his grandfather as a child, but he also remembered running around the house with his younger siblings. It was all a bit strange, but not exactly unpleasant. I had a pleasant childhood. I vaguely remember my father, but my grandfather was a great father figure in my life. Itadori smiled as memories of his parents and grandparents came to mind, even though he only spoke of Itadori's childhood. I have nothing to complain about. Maki simply observed him, and with a silent nod, she continued walking alongside him. So, what's your plan? Itadori suddenly asked. I can't really be seen. Even with the elders dead, the clans might still choose to follow through with the execution order. You'll stay hidden outside while I get the cursed tools. If anything happens, I'll make sure to alert you. Right. Itadori nodded, even though he didn't plan to stay hidden. You should be careful. I doubt they'll hand over the cursed tools so easily. Maki just shook her head. She doubted it would be as simple as walking in and taking them, but she also didn't believe the clan would try anything too drastic, as it could damage their reputation with the other clans. The game created by Kenjaku wasn't something the clans viewed favorably, as it had led to the revelation of cursed energy to the world. The Zenin clan would need an excellent excuse if they wanted to eliminate those trying to stop Kenjaku. "We've arrived," Maki declared as she stopped in front of what appeared to be a shrine, Itadori beside her noticing numerous traditional-style buildings not far off. "After this point, the Kukuru squad will be able to see you, so you'd better hide," she warned, with Itadori nodding and stepping back. "Stay alert." Moving behind a tree, Itadori gave one last glance at Maki, who was staring at the clan's entrance with a distant look. "Hey, Maki." Calling out to her, he made her turn towards him. "Don't try to do everything alone, I'll be here if you need me." Maki stared at him for a few seconds before offering a grateful smile. "Alright." Naoya felt humiliated. After having his title as heir to the clan revoked and given to Megumi, he was further disgraced by the dark sorcerer and Aoi Tadu, who had beaten him. Returning to the clan only to notice the mocking gazes made it even worse. It fueled his hatred for the sorcerers even more. He intended to recover from his injuries and ambush Megumi differently, but the plan proposed by his uncle made him rethink his approach. Most of the Zenin clan agreed that they couldn't grant such power to Megumi, someone who hadn't even been raised according to their doctrines. That's why, when Oji Zenin suggested executing the sorcerers to prevent the release of Satoru Gojo, the other members didn't object. Having Maki arrive alone at the Zenin grounds only made the plan easier. Killing his own daughters will definitely lend him more credibility. Naoya laughed at the thought of Oji standing over the bodies of Maki and Mai. How cruel. In front of him, Junichi didn't react, arms crossed over his chest. "Our reputation will be solidified among the clans, and that's something we need in this crisis. With the elders out of the picture, our clan will be at the top to succeed them." Yeah, Naoya waved his hand, clearly uninterested in the technical details. For him, just knowing that the clan he would soon command would gain even more influence was enough. "Be serious, Naoya. You're still arrogant even after coming back severely injured from your fight with Megumi Fushiguro?" Junichi's eyes narrowed at the young Zenin's disinterest, his harsh words making Naoya's face twist with irritation. "Megumi is clearly a better option than you to lead us. You'll only succeed Naobito due to circumstance." "What did you say?" Naoya's killing intent flared, a vein pulsing in his forehead as his teeth clenched in anger. "It was 3 against 1, you bastard. I could have killed him whenever I wanted." Junichi didn't flinch at his aura, only staring back with his usual cold gaze. "Sure." His response was seemingly in agreement, but Naoya could detect the mocking tone in his monotony, which only irritated him further. In the end, he decided to let it go. Junichi's words didn't matter because Naoya would be the one to lead the Zenin. Soon, he would have the final say in all his uncle's decisions. He could avenge those words any time in the future. "And speaking of your battle with Fushiguro, did you encounter Sukuna's vessel?" Junichi raised his gaze, turning to Naoya, who now appeared a bit calmer. Naoya observed him for a moment, his eyes wandering around the room as he seemed to try to decipher the motive behind that question. "I intended to kill him too, but he wasn't with Megumi." Junichi nodded, picking up a glass of water from the table in front of him and taking a sip before responding. "I've assigned the Kukuru squad to hunt him down as soon as we eliminate Megumi Fushiguro. The mere thought of Sukuna returning frightens most of the clans, and killing him will give us even more credibility. In that case, our clan will gain even more trust." "That's good," Naoya smiled, taking a sip of his own water. "That's exactly what I said. Stop repeating what I say in simpler words, it makes you look like an idiot." Naoya gritted his teeth. "You bastard. In any case, you need to stay alert. Our information is that Sukuna's vessel became a sorcerer almost 4 months ago, and since then, Satoru Gojo kept everything about him confidential, even from the elders. Junichi moved his hand to a folder on the table, opening it and revealing a photo of Itadori when he was first captured after consuming Sukuna's finger. We don't know anything about his abilities, only rumors that he has great talent with cursed energy manipulation. Naoya scoffed, seemingly uninterested. If that's all, he's no better than the idiots from the Kukuru squad. Why should I be worried? An unknown opponent is the one who holds the most potential danger. Did you forget that? Naoya only shrugged in response, looking away. It doesn't matter how mysterious they are if they don't see me coming. Junichi didn't react. The young man's pride was only surpassed by his hatred for women. So proud. But nowhere near as fast as his father. It was a little disappointing. He could try to knock some sense into the boy by reminding him that even one of the fastest, Naobito, ended up incinerated. But it would be a waste of time. Nothing he said would knock any sense into Naoya. In the end, the question was whether he was willing to waste his breath. And no, he wasn't. If Naoya ended up dead because of his arrogance in the future, Junichi wouldn't mind Oji taking over the clan. To be honest, Naoya dying from his own arrogance even seemed like something pleasant to witness. Why do I feel like you're thinking less of me? Naoya narrowed his eyes as he noticed Junichi silently staring at him. That's all in your head. Looking away with his usual monotone expression, Junichi took another sip of water. Outside the room where the two were talking, Itadori, not far away, used a nearby tree to listen in on their conversation. Hanami's technique was a bit strange and even a little inefficient, but he had to admit that it was an undeniably great technique for spying. Its ability to listen to everything nearby through plants imbued with a bit of cursed energy wasn't really listening. The plants had their own way of receiving sound waves and relaying information. It was like a strange language that Itadori seemed to hear whenever he was in a nature-covered environment. At first, he had labeled the technique as useless, but with a bit of effort, he had managed to decipher what the plants were saying. And it wasn't really pleasant stuff. Itadori could understand Hanami's hatred for humans. Having thousands of plants screaming at you to annihilate humanity, especially those who chose to eat only plants, wasn't exactly therapeutic. Fortunately, blocking these demands wasn't difficult. The plants seemed to have a great fear of death. All Itadori had to do was threaten to burn them once, and they submitted to his requests. A bit funny, actually. I should go. Disconnecting from the surrounding nature, Itadori touched his chest with a focused look. I've heard enough. Suddenly, his body split into two in a grotesque process, his flesh stretching in what appeared to be a painful way. Damn, this is still weird. He shivered as he looked back to see a perfect clone of himself staring at him with a questioning look. What? The clone just shook its head in disappointment, causing Itadori to glare at it irritably. Just keep an eye on the idiot scattered around the clan. Once I give the signal, I need you to draw as much attention as possible. The clone nodded and, without saying a word, quickly moved away. A clone carrying 50% of his strength, a nice achievement for Itadori, who had assimilated the technique less than 2 weeks ago. But he couldn't give all the credit to his talent. He had to sacrifice essential traits of the clone, such as the ability to speak. Other traits as well, but that didn't need elaboration. Itadori wasn't a specialist like Sukuna, but he knew that by sacrificing something, he would receive something in return. A very simple binding vow, so simple that Itadori didn't need to do anything besides removing the clone's abilities. His clone still couldn't use his techniques, but 50% of his attributes and a decent amount of cursed energy would be enough for what he had in mind. To be honest, Itadori didn't even see the Zenin clan as a threat, but he was being cautious because he didn't want what happened with Junpei to happen again. He couldn't act impulsively, he needed countermeasures, and that's what he had been preparing since Maki entered the premises. From that moment on, the Zenin clan's existence would depend entirely on his mood. Oji was the one who should have led the Zenin clan. At least, that's what Oji firmly believed. Since childhood, Oji had been more skilled, from sword practice to even hand-to-hand combat. In his eyes, he surpassed Naobito in every possible way. But luck didn't seem to be on his side, because when they were young, Naobito awakened a powerful innate technique. A technique that was not only versatile but also quite powerful, a new achievement for the Zenin clan at the time. Seeing Naobito gain so much attention irritated Oji, but he calmed down when he realized his technique would soon awaken as well. After all, he was better than his brother at everything. There was no way his technique would be inferior, right? He was completely wrong. Although lethal, his cursed technique wasn't anything special. Blazing Courage basically consisted of the ability to channel concentrated flames, a weak pyrokinesis that shone when combined with a sword. Compared to his brother's technique, it was nothing special. It didn't attract the attention of the clan leader at the time. But did that alone condemn Oji to always remain in his brother's shadow? No, of course not. He could still improve his skills to surpass him. That alone wasn't enough to declare the clan's future leader. But the birth of his children was. Initially, Oji felt irritated when his wife gave birth to 2 girls, but hope still burned in his chest that they would inherit powerful techniques. So it was painfully disappointing when both girls, Maki and Mai, turned out to be nothing more than burdens. While Naobito had a son who had inherited his innate technique, Oji had 2 useless creatures. That was the tipping point for his downfall, to make it clear who should really take over the clan leadership. The day Naobito became the patriarch was the day Oji disowned his 2 daughters, leaving them at the mercy of the world and deciding to ignore their existence. But no matter how hard he tried, this stain still followed him, always reminding him of his inability to produce a worthy heir. The opportunity to finally cleanse these stains felt like a blessing in his life. The opportunity to eliminate the failures of his life. With the warehouse door opening, Oji raised his head to see the one who had disrespected him so many times, the one who was truly nothing but complete trash. Father. Maki narrowed her eyes as she noticed the man sitting in the middle of the room, approaching with her hand firmly on the hilt of her sword. There are no cursed weapons here, I anticipated your move and got rid of them. Rising with an expressionless look, Oji stepped aside to reveal Mai lying in a pool of her own blood. Maki's eyes widened at this, a little relief coming to her when Mai raised her head to see her. Mai. Maki gritted her teeth, and drawing her sword, the cursed weapon created by Kamiya Juzo, she positioned herself firmly in front of her father. There was no need to declare what they were going to do. Their father never cared about them, so Maki felt no hesitation in confronting him. At this point, he was no different from a curse. She would kill him and save her sister. Do you know why my older brother became the leader instead of me? Lowering his stance, Oji prepared to draw his own blade. Because you're trash who doesn't mind killing his own daughters? Maki asked in a venomous tone, her killing intent leaking from her body as she readied herself. No. With Oji drawing his sword in a quick motion, he swiftly charged forward, Maki barely blocking a strike to her abdomen before turning and counterattacking. Oji's eyes widened and he immediately turned, raising his sword, his blade being sliced in half by the impact. Surprise washed over his face, and Maki took advantage of the moment to advance and slash. The reason. With those words leaving the Zenin's mouth, Maki was surprised when Oji retreated with a single step, a small cut opening on his cheek at the same time as he landed an attack on her abdomen. Maki watched in confusion as she felt a blade open her abdomen, accompanied by an unusual burning sensation. Her eyes dropped to see a flaming sword in her father's hands. I see. I slipped up. It's because you two are nothing but failures. Maki spat blood as she felt her legs give way, her hand pressing the cut on her abdomen in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. It's not a normal cut, so that won't help. Oji stared at the girl with cold eyes, a tired sigh escaping his lips. Just accept your fate. Grabbing her shirt, he dragged her over to Mai. I couldn't expect anything from you. Mai murmured weakly, a mocking smile forming on her lips. But still, I'm quite disappointed. Gripping her shirt, Oji pulled her with enough force to make her groan in pain. A failure like you, trying to judge me? Ridiculous. Ha. Using us as an excuse for your own failure. Mai mocked, Oji simply ignoring her as he continued to drag them. Who's the ridiculous one here? Oji paused, his eyes narrowing for a moment. You were the failures of my life, that's a fact. Declaring coldly, he gave Mai one last look before stopping at the top of the stairs leading directly to the training pit, a room filled with curses. Children should never stand in the way of their parents. Mai bit her lips, her tired eyes lifting to see her father's angry face. No. She let her smile widen, blood dripping from her lips. The failure here is you. Freezing as an ominous presence silenced all the curses hidden in the darkness of that room, Oji's eyes widened as he slowly turned. She's completely right. And with a new voice declaring, Oji quickly noticed a figure approaching the warehouse entrance, his eyes narrowing as his hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword. Someone who uses the weakness of a child to justify their own failures, that's the real failure. Oji narrowed his eyes. Having a stranger suddenly judging him wasn't pleasant. And who are you to judge me? A toothy smile spread across the figure's lips, his cursed energy flowing wildly around his body in a display of his vast reserves. Me? Right now, I'm just a player moving pieces on the board. I don't consider myself that important. But I'm confident that won't take long to change, after all. Mai watched the stranger with a hopeful look as she noticed him provoking Zenin, her attention shifting to her sister when she saw Maki slightly open one eye. I'm the one who's going to reshape everything. Maki smiled, even with the excruciating pain from her wound and the rapid blood loss threatening to knock her out. Itadori. Why did it take you so long, you idiot? Itadori? Mai seemed surprised, and focusing more on the figure, she noticed the pink-haired sorcerer. The blood loss seemed to have affected her vision. He's here to help. Itadori? Oji raised an eyebrow at the mention of the name. The Sukuna vessel? Itadori ignored the question, his eyes moving to see Maki and Mai injured behind the Zenin. Sorry for the delay, I was making some preparations. Mai was sweating coldly. Staying conscious seemed increasingly difficult. It doesn't matter. Just save my sister. Mai practically pleaded, and pushing herself up on her elbows, she looked at Itadori with imploring eyes. Damn, I hate this. But just take her and run. A flaming blade appeared in front of her face, silencing her. Be quiet. Itadori watched this with an impassive face, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Oji. Don't worry. Mai's body grew heavier, the rest of her strength fading as she lay back down. I'm not leaving without both of you. And before consciousness left her, that was the last thing she heard. A confident declaration, that even in the face of death, filled her with a bit of hope. What confidence to say that, boy? Oji declared irritably, his dark eyes wandering over the boy in an attempt to analyze him as he adjusted his posture with the sword. But coming here, you've only made my clan's work easier. Your clan is a little too overconfident, old man. Itadori stepped forward, his fists tightening with cracks from his knuckles. Do you really think you'll take over the elder's position? No, I couldn't let a bunch of failures get so cocky. And what are you going to do about it, insolent brat? Oji's eyes widened as a strong killing intent was directed at him, his grip on the sword hilt tightening as sweat began to drip down his face. The same thing I did to the elders. The Zenin froze as he understood the implication of those words, his eyes widening as the flames of his sword intensified. No. He refused to believe it was true. It was impossible that the elders had been killed by a boy with less than 4 months as a sorcerer. Nonsense. Oji shouted irritably, and raising his sword, he let the fire dance around him. I'll burn you completely for your arrogance. Charging at the boy, Oji passed by him in a burst of speed while making a slash, the flames burning the ground and leaving a trail of smoke in his wake. But when Oji didn't hear the usual sound of a body collapsing, he turned alertly. Only to see something that made his blood run cold. Was that supposed to burn? With a cut appearing on Itadori's jacket, he turned to Oji with a mocking smile. It was even a little refreshing. What? The Zenin asked incredulously, his eyes landing on his flaming blade to make sure he hadn't deactivated his technique. How is this possible? You want to see something that really cuts and burns? Oji's eyes widened as intense heat flew in his direction, and he could only freeze in perplexity, his eyes moving downward to notice his hand holding his sword on the ground. A cut capable of cauterizing the wound, that's how it should be done. Oji slowly moved his gaze to his hand, his mouth opening in pure terror when there was nothing but a charred cut in his flesh. You damn. Slice. With countless cuts striking him before he could finish his curse, Itadori watched the Zenin's body split into pieces with a cold look, an irritated click of his tongue escaping. After witnessing a useless man placing all the responsibility for his failures on his own daughters, his mood was far from the best. It might be strange, but he felt better seeing the old man's desperate look. At least it helped improve his mood a little. Turning to see the two women lying in pools of their own blood, Itadori pressed his lips together before quickly approaching. Good thing I created a clone to distract them. What I'll do now will require considerable time without interruptions. The body is the soul, and the soul is the body. Itadori used to hear discussions about this even in his previous life. He didn't know if the rules regarding the soul in this world applied to his old one, but since he now possessed an ability that allowed him to see deeply into others' souls, he could answer most of the questions he used to have. The soul was the body, that was indeed a truth. Affect one, and you affect the other, but in different degrees. The soul didn't come first, nor did the body. Both emerged equally, without one superseding the other. But to be precise, it was as if the two remained in different realms, yet still affected one another. For this reason, accessing the soul in a distinct way was possible, but affecting it without causing damage to the physical body was impossible. Essentially, the soul carried information, and it was responsible for both emotions and cursed energy. As for the body, it served as a glue, keeping the soul always together. A rather strange concept, but one that seemed to work for the world of Jujutsu Kaisen. This explained why Geto was still able to impose his will against Kenjaku's control even after death, but it didn't explain how only Sukuna's soul resided within Itadori's body. Without a body, there should be no soul. Yet, somehow, some people were able to defy this rule. But that didn't really matter, because the only thing Itadori needed to know was whether or not he could access the realm of Maki and Mai's souls, the intertwining of their souls. If he could do that, breaking the twins' curse shouldn't be impossible. Observing the pale faces of the two girls lying before him, Itadori took a deep breath as he knelt down. He needed to be quick, or they would end up dying from internal injuries. If he could heal them, he wouldn't be under so much pressure, but maintaining the shape of their souls wasn't a simple process, especially since he couldn't even correct the form of his own soul without risks. And reverse cursed energy was still a strange concept. He could feel the information of the technique being etched slowly into his body after Sukuna's use and the miracles, but it wasn't really an easy concept to reproduce. Especially when healing others. Footsteps. Noticing the countless footsteps outside the warehouse, Itadori narrowed his eyes as he waited for them to move away. His clone was serving as a decoy to give him enough time to act without interruptions. 50% wasn't much, but it should be enough to hold them off for a few minutes. He just hoped it would be enough time. Let's go. Clasping his hands together, Itadori turned to the two, an apprehensive sigh escaping his lips. If he made a single slip-up, he could affect their souls in an irreversible way, so he would need to muster as much concentration as possible. The lives of two beautiful women were in his hands. It wasn't that different from his job as an electrician on the space station, when he stopped to think about it. With a nervous smile, he let cursed energy cover his hands, his fingers touching both Maki's and Mai's foreheads. Don't abandon me now, Luck. As his cursed energy enveloped their bodies, in his concentration, he didn't notice when a soft glow emanated from the triangular tattoo on his forearm. Alarm! When an alert bell rang throughout the clan's village, Naoya turned to Junichi with a curious look. We should move. Junichi stood up, and Naoya followed as the two began walking down the corridor. Junichi-san. A voice calling for their attention made them turn to see Ranta running toward them. It seems someone is attacking us. He's already taken down some members of the Kukuru squad and destroyed a few towers. Ranta said urgently. Just one person? Naoya raised an eyebrow, and Ranta nodded to confirm. Then why hasn't the Kukuru squad taken him out? What did the scout say? Junichi narrowed his eyes. The members of the Kukuru squad weren't ordinary sorcerers. They were trained from a young age to be proficient with all kinds of weapons, as well as being strong martial artists. If someone didn't have a technique that gave them an advantage, a squad of 4 members would be enough. They only reported that he was fast and had good control of cursed energy. No technique was mentioned. Naoya scratched his head in irritation. From Ranta's words, whoever the invader was, didn't seem to be much. The Kukuru squad seemed to be slacking off too much to be killed by trash. He would make sure to reform them when he became the clan leader. Where's Nobuaki? Junichi rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look. Ranta rubbed the back of his neck, nervousness evident in his expression, as Naoya and Junichi stared at him seriously. He was the first to encounter the invader. Sigh. Junichi shook his head in disappointment, and turning away, he signaled for the 2 Zenins to follow. Let's deal with this. The 3 walked briskly down the corridor, and it didn't take long for them to exit the traditional house, with Junichi immediately spotting members of the Kukuru squad moving around. What a mess. Naoya spat in disgust. Without Nobuaki, they're lost like rats. Right dash. Just as Junichi was about to speak, an explosion drew the attention of the 3, with pieces of wood flying everywhere. What was that? Ranta asked in bewilderment, while Naoya clicked his tongue beside him. Damn it. These idiots are letting that trash make fools of us. Naoya complained. Junichi cautiously observed the chaotic environment, his eyes scanning the area quickly as he thought about what to do. Ranta, come with me. Naoya, go find Oji. I have a bad feeling. Naoya turned to Junichi with a questioning expression, but when Junichi gave him a firm look, he turned away in irritation. Fine. And disappearing in a flash of speed, Junichi and Ranta were left side by side. They didn't need words to decide their next moves. After all, they were members of the Hei squad. The strongest squad in the Zenin clan. Boom! With another explosion tearing through the building next to them, the 2 immediately turned when footsteps echoed from the rooftop. As a shadow emerged from the explosion's smoke, the first thing the Zenins noticed were the pink locks of hair. Ranta immediately widened his eyes, recognizing their attacker. Junichi-san, that dash, Ranta pointed in bewilderment, Junichi turning to him questioningly. That's Sukuna's vessel. Junichi's eyes narrowed, and turning to Itadori cautiously, the Zenin clenched his fists as cursed energy surged through his body. Keep your distance, we don't know what he can do. Right. Ranta nodded, beads of sweat forming on his face. Itadori narrowed his eyes. He might be a clone, but he retained all the memories of the original body, so he immediately recognized Ranta. The Zenin must have an interesting technique that allowed him to paralyze anyone under his gaze. Given his cursed energy, he didn't seem to be a direct combatant, but he was certainly the most dangerous to Itadori. With only 50% of his full power, he couldn't afford to take direct hits. If he got paralyzed, he'd be an easy target for the rest of the clan members. Ranta had to be the priority target. Ranta, now! Startled when Junichi suddenly ordered, Itadori leaped to narrowly escape Ranta's paralysis, his eyes widening as a gigantic fist smashed through the house in front of him. Boom! Hit directly, Itadori gritted his teeth as he dug his feet into the ground to halt his momentum. Giant fists, this seemed to be the long-haired Zenin's technique, Junichi. Interesting, but nothing too serious. Moving behind a house, Itadori reached into his pockets for a smoke bomb. After taking out some common members, he managed to gather some equipment that would greatly help him in this battle. He couldn't rely solely on the destructive power of his fists or techniques, he'd use every strategy available. Feeling the ground beneath his feet tremble, Itadori had no time to react as an enormous earth pillar shot him and the wooden house upward, his body spinning as he saw Junichi charging at full speed toward him. Earth manipulation, the clone thought, and landing firmly on the ground, he prepared himself as Junichi pulled back his fist. I want that. Ducking under the Zenin's punch, Itadori countered with a precise blow to the ribs, the air escaping from Junichi's lungs in surprise. Such strength. The Zenin pushed himself away with a burst of speed. But caught off guard when an object appeared in front of his eyes, he barely reacted as an explosion of smoke enveloped him, obscuring his vision. Itadori smirked at this and passed by him, immediately spotting Ranta on a rooftop. The Zenin noticed him, his eyes widening in surprise. But before Itadori could reach him, another earth pillar struck him, sending his body crashing through a house. Thank you, Chojuro-san. Ranta exclaimed as Chojuro, an elder of the clan with the technique to manipulate the earth, landed in front of him. I just need to paralyze him, and everything will be solved. I'm counting on you. The old man nodded and, leaping from the rooftop, landed on the ground and moved his hands toward the earth. But before his palms could make contact with the ground, his eyes widened as a blade appeared in front of him, slashing his throat. Chojuro coughed up blood, and just as he tried to press the wound in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding, he didn't react in time as Itadori appeared before him and drove his elbow into the hilt of the knife, driving the blade completely through his throat, leaving a gaping hole. Chojuro-san. Ranta shouted for the elder, gritting his teeth in frustration as he prepared to use his technique. Get down, Ranta. But as the command reached him, Ranta was startled when Chojuro's body was hurled towards him. The Zenin caught it and ducked down. Itadori pressed his lips together in frustration, turning to see Junichi running toward him. Boy, the Zenin spoke firmly as he retracted his fists. You're going to regret coming here. Boom! With numerous giant fists being launched at their target, Junichi paused for a moment to assess the damage, noting how most of the houses behind where Itadori had stood were completely demolished. Wait! But not seeing any sign of Itadori's body, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. I don't see him. Stepping forward, he was startled when his foot suddenly sank, his eyes dropping to see a hand gripping his leg. Raising his arms, he blocked a fist charged with cursed energy as Itadori emerged from the ground, sending his body upward. Even if I can't use techniques. The clone smiled, landing a full punch to the Zenin's abdomen, causing Junichi to spit blood as he was pushed back. My body is still abnormal. Just as he was about to advance on the enemy, Itadori gasped as his body froze against his will, a tingling sensation rippling through every inch of his muscles. Now, Junichi-san! Ranta shouted, his hands raised as he kept his eyes wide open to maintain Itadori's paralysis. I can't move. Itadori smiled as the tingling sensation tickled his entire body, his eyes moving to see Junichi recovering from the previous attack and running toward him with cursed energy-filled fists. This technique. With Itadori's smile widening, he prepared himself. I want it. Ranta, focused on keeping his technique active, didn't notice when a piece of flesh moved on Chojiro's body, a hand forming and grabbing an object inside the dead elder's shirt. Even if I can't use other techniques, that doesn't mean I can't manipulate my own body, Itadori thought. Hold him, Ranta. Junichi shouted as he neared Itadori. Right. He won't escape. Boom. With a smoke bomb exploding from Chojiro's body, Ranta was caught off guard, his eyes closing instinctively. Consequently, Itadori regained his mobility immediately, and Junichi didn't notice as he finally reached him, launching a fist toward his chest. Surprised when Itadori dodged his punch, Junichi had no time to react when a fist connected squarely with his solar plexus. At 50% of my total power, should be on par with myself from a month ago. Grabbing the Zenin by the hair, Itadori slammed his face into the ground with enough force to bury it. That's more than enough to deal with you. What a disappointment. Letting cursed energy overflow from his fists, Itadori launched a punch toward the Zenin's buried head. Black flash. And with black lightning crackling throughout the area, Junichi Zenin's fate was sealed. Cough, cough. Ranta staggered out of the smoke cloud with narrowed eyes, his mouth dropping in disbelief the moment he saw Itadori standing over Junichi's body. What? And as Itadori placed a finger to his lips in a gesture of silence, the Zenin realized. He was screwed. Life in the Zenin clan was never pleasant for the untalented. Those born without a valuable cursed technique would hardly be treated with respect and dignity. From childhood, they were subjected to rigorous training so that, at the very least, they could serve some purpose for the clan. Enjoying childhood like a normal child was a privilege for those born with talent. Mai and Maki were not among those people. As women born into the clan, they were typically expected to be groomed as housewives, prepared to satisfy a future clan man, or merely as vessels to pass down a certain cursed technique. But as daughters of the clan head's brother, they had more opportunities. Oji hoped that they might awaken a technique that could give him an edge in the race to become the next clan head. For that reason, he didn't reprimand Maki when she showed interest in becoming stronger. Unfortunately, a sorcerer's cursed energy potential could be detected early on. From a young age, a sorcerer's reserves wouldn't grow much beyond what they already had. If a sorcerer was born with a Class C amount of cursed energy, they could, at best, increase their reserves to a C+. Unfortunately, while Mai was born with Class E reserves, Maki was born with Class F-. There was no hope for either of them. A complete loss for Oji, who then chose to ignore them for the rest of his life. Maki and Mai's life in the Zenin clan was bearable until Oji lost hope. After that, no one was left to protect them. It was from that point on that everything worsened. Receiving a kick to the face, an 11-year-old Maki fell on her backside, blood streaming uncontrollably from her nose while tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Why don't you just give up? Standing before her, an imposing Naoya glared down at her with a disdainful smirk. "Can't you see this is going nowhere?" Sniffling, Maki wiped her nose while gritting her teeth, her irritation obvious to the older Zenin, who merely shrugged with a sigh. "What nonsense." Delivering another kick, Naoya sent Maki's head crashing into the ground with enough force to daze her, her vision blurring. Without Oji's protection, Naoya tormented them whenever he pleased. There didn't seem to be any reason behind it other than the pure sadistic pleasure of seeing a little girl bleeding at his feet. Naoya's actions were frowned upon by most members of the clan, but none dared to reprimand the son of the clan head. Besides, with his projection technique, Naoya wasn't exactly someone easy to challenge. He was like a demon, and this time, his sights were set on two innocent girls. "Hey!" Squatting next to her, Naoya grabbed Maki by the chin, his fingers squeezing her cheek as a malicious grin spread across his face. "I want to avoid messing up your pretty face since you'll be useful to me someday. But your angry look really gets on my nerves, so let's avoid that, okay?" Maki growled at his words, and gathering some blood in her mouth, she spat in the Zenin's face, who immediately let go and stepped back, irritated. "You little bitch." He wiped his face as a vein bulged on his forehead, and turning to Maki, he kicked her hard in the stomach. "I'll dash." "Naoya." But a voice interrupted him, and Naoya turned in annoyance to see Junichi staring at him indifferently. "Leave her, the clan head wants to see you." Naoya glared coldly, but when Junichi held his ground, Naoya spat on the floor and turned to Maki. "This isn't over." Walking away, he passed by his cousin without looking back, Junichi giving one last glance at Maki's bruised body on the ground before following him. "Damn it." Maki groaned in pain as she tried to move. These beatings weren't uncommon. Maki's refusal to submit to Naoya had irritated him to the point where he beat her several times a week. But no matter how much he hit her, she never backed down. This only served to anger him further. Having someone so insignificant refuse to bow to him infuriated him the most. The only reason he didn't kill Maki was because he saw her as a potential future wife, given that he needed to pass on his technique. He could do something truly terrible to her, but Maki's personality didn't attract him. But Naoya knew of a way to hurt Maki that nothing physical could ever compare to. Something truly wicked, even for him. As night fell, Mai suddenly woke up, her dry throat bothering her as a yawn escaped her mouth. Hearing a snore, she turned to see Maki sleeping soundly next to her, which made her smile warmly. Carefully getting up so as not to wake her sister, she left the room with quick steps. Noticing her dry lips, she moistened them once before continuing down the dark corridor of their quarters. Mai didn't like the Zenin clan. She might seem more tolerant than her sister, but she truly hated the place where she lived. But having Maki by her side made everything bearable. As long as Maki stayed with her, she could tolerate the idiots around her for as long as needed. Maki was like her anchor, keeping her grounded. They would always be together, always. Stopping in the hallway when a thud sounded behind her, Mai turned around, startled, her eyes scanning the darkness of the corridor only to find nothing. Phew. She sighed in relief, for a moment thinking it might be one of those spirits she occasionally saw. After watching the darkness for a while, she shrugged and turned to continue her way to the kitchen. But as she took her first step, she was startled when something suddenly appeared in front of her, her face colliding with it and pushing her backward. What? Dash. As she looked confused, her eyes widened when a hand covered her mouth and her body was suddenly shoved to the ground, her back hitting hard. Hey! Fear flashed in her eyes as she tried to scream for help, but the hand over her mouth muffled her cries, leaving only desperate whimpers. Kids always want to grow up too fast. I can understand that, after all, adults have autonomy, they can protect the ones they love. With the voice whispering in her ear, Mai began to notice the features of the person holding her down, and it didn't take long for her to recognize the blonde hair of the one who loved tormenting her sister. Tell me, Mai. Don't you want to become an adult? That way, you could protect your sister, how about that? Naoya licked his lips as he spoke, a malicious gleam in his eyes as his hand rested on the girl's waist. Mai shuddered under his touch as tears formed in the corners of her eyes. Well, your answer doesn't really matter anyway. Naoya smiled, letting his hand roam over her. You should thank me, Mai. Tonight, you'll become an adult. As Mai's struggles intensified for a moment, all she could do was let the tears stream down her face as her efforts proved futile. Without Maki, Mai felt weak. When the two were together, she felt protected, she felt strong, but Maki wasn't there for her. She wasn't there to save her. Itadori's eyes snapped open as these memories filled his mind, nausea rising in his throat due to the overwhelming influx of information and the sickening act he had just witnessed. Son of a bitch. He supported his hands on his knees, trying to organize his thoughts, his brain quickly sorting out Maki and Mai's memories. Damn it. He cursed, and as his eyes moved to his forearm, he noticed the absence of a miracle. I guess without a miracle, my brain would have short-circuited. He regulated his breathing and, with a sigh, lifted his head to see where he was. It was a massive surprise when he noticed two enormous glowing orbs, shimmering as if white flames surrounded them, their light hypnotic. So this is what it's like to access the threshold between souls. He blinked as he observed the two intertwined souls, his eyes wandering around the space to find nothing but pure darkness. It's actually kind of empty. I guess it's like being in a room where the soul is held, rather than the soul itself. He curiously examined the surroundings for a few more seconds before moving to stand in front of the two souls. What he had seen was truly something. He had never accessed a soul before, so it was a surprise when the memories of the two girls flooded his mind. He forgot most of it after a few seconds, but he remembered their traumas, their happy moments. It was as if, for a moment, he had become part of them. It was unsettling, to say the least. Hey, Maki. And looking at the souls of the two girls, Itadori spoke with a gentle smile, raising his hands as cursed energy gathered in his palms. The fact that he had seen so deeply into their memories was also a reason behind the decision he was about to make. Sorry for stealing your moment like this. And with his cursed energy enveloping their souls, he began to slowly but surely untangle them. But I'm going to destroy everything. Feeling the two souls tremble in response, as if they understood what he had told them, Itadori's smile widened as his eyes gleamed dangerously. None of them would escape. Naoya didn't expect to find much of interest. No matter how incompetent his uncle Oji was, he doubted that Maki could defeat him. The only reason he followed Junichi's order was because he wanted to take one last look at Mai's body. Since that pleasant night, Mai had served him a few more times whenever he was too agitated. It had been gratifying, every time. Seeing Maki's face submitting to him filled him with incomparable excitement. He liked that. Maki had grown into a beautiful woman, but her crappy personality wasn't something that attracted Naoya. Luckily, Mai was there for him, and despite her also joining a jujitsu school, he knew that whenever he wanted, he just had to go fetch her, no matter where she was hiding. He didn't consider himself one of the fastest for nothing. Walking through the corridor that led to the warehouse, Naoya narrowed his eyes as he noticed several dead guards along the way. It seemed that no matter how much of a piece of trash Maki was, she could still deal with a few idiots. Nothing surprising, considering the level of the other trash without innate techniques. But noticing a huge hole in one of the guards' chests, Naoya raised an eyebrow suspiciously. Could Maki have done something like that? Shaking his head, he simply shrugged as he continued. She must have used a cursed tool or something. Kicking one of the bodies aside, he stopped in front of the warehouse door, his eyes scanning the cracks when he noticed a bit of cursed energy leaking out. Oji felt so pressured that he had to use that much cursed energy. How humiliating. Naoya spat disdainfully and, grabbing the doorknob, he opened it all at once. That's why trash like him will never become the clan head. Stepping inside the warehouse, his eyes widened when instead of finding Oji standing over the lifeless bodies of Maki and Mai, he saw a pile of ashes with Oji's broken sword on the ground. Urgency filled his eyes as he turned to see a pink-haired boy emitting a huge amount of cursed energy. What the hell is this? Naoya was confused, quickly noticing Maki and Mai lying in front of the pink-haired boy. Who the hell are you? Narrowing his eyes, a vein throbbed on his forehead as the boy remained focused. Naoya gritted his teeth as he let his own cursed energy flow through his body. Screw it, Oji isn't here, so I'll assume you killed him. And with a malicious smile, Naoya prepared to rush toward the boy, who seemed to be in some kind of ritual with the two girls' bodies. I'll make you regret invading this. Black. Stepping forward, his eyes widened when a voice came from behind him, his head quickly turning to see the same pink-haired boy preparing his fist, overflowing with cursed energy. A clone? Flash. Boom. As Itadori's fist landed squarely on Naoya's back, he gritted his teeth as he was sent flying across the warehouse, blood spilling from his mouth. Damn it. Stopping his momentum with his feet, Naoya turned with veins bulging on his forehead, the pain in his back intensifying, causing his legs to tremble. Who are you, you bastard? Itadori's clone blinked with a surprised look as Naoya turned toward him, his eyes landing on his own fist as he scratched his head in confusion. Damn, 50% really reduced my power. I should have broken his spine. What the hell are you talking about? Naoya was about to question him, but the sudden bile rising in his throat stopped him, his eyes widening as he began to vomit everything in his stomach. The clone just shrugged. Well, it was still serious damage to the spine, should be enough. The Zenin wiped his lips, his face twisted in fury as he lifted his head to face the young sorcerer, allowing cursed energy to overflow from his body. He didn't know what any of this meant, but the boy in front of him had pissed him off enough. Given that there were two of them, it was easy to assume his technique was cloning, making him the likely culprit behind the clan invasion. But no matter how painful the attack was, it wouldn't be enough to take him down. Cloning was far from a technique that could compare to projection sorcery. Naoya wouldn't be intimidated by trash pretending to be strong. He would deal with the invader with his own hands. You piece of trash. Seeing Itadori watching him with crossed arms, Naoya gritted his teeth in frustration. Don't pretend you're in control. Disappearing from the young sorcerer's sight, Naoya moved toward him at a blinding speed. But as he closed in and prepared to strike, he was surprised to see the boy raise his arms to defend, Naoya's fist hitting his guard and pushing him back. He reacted. Leaping back, Itadori shook his arm with a cocky look, a small smile forming on his lips. Projection sorcery. He narrowed his eyes as he stared at the Zenin. An impressive technique, but its weakness is that while using it, Naoya can't change the trajectory of his movement. That leaves him with a limited number of actions, so assuming he'll always come at me to attack, I just need to block the right spot or dodge at the exact moment he moves. Itadori raised his fists, positioning himself confidently in front of his opponent as he sneered at Naoya's venomous glare. But even knowing that, I can tell. With the Zenin vanishing from sight, Itadori jumped to avoid being hit as Naoya suddenly punched where he had been. This is going to be a pain. Kicking Naoya in the face, Itadori growled as the Zenin disappeared and reappeared a few meters away, the young sorcerer landing firmly on the ground and rushing toward his target. Too slow. Naoya sneered as he dodged Itadori's punch and countered with an elbow to the face. Yuji quickly seized the opportunity to grab his arm. But just as Itadori was about to bring him down, the Zenin vanished once again, a fist hitting the young sorcerer's face as Naoya appeared beside him. Damn it! Itadori cursed as he spat blood, his hand moving to his jacket and pulling out a smoke bomb. Boom! And triggering it immediately, a smoke explosion forced Naoya to step back, his eyes narrowing as he tried to locate Itadori through the smoke screen. How irritating! Inside the smoke, Itadori muttered while sitting on the floor. I can't wait for a chance to land multiple hits on him. I need to be as precise as the previous Black Flash. Rubbing his chin thoughtfully, he gazed up at the wooden ceiling with a knowing look. I think as long as I don't hit my original body, it should be fine. Standing up, he dusted off his pants before sighing, his expression hardening as cursed energy gathered in his fists. Damn, what's taking the original so long? With a powerful clap, the smoke cleared, revealing Itadori to Naoya, who stared at him in frustration. Found you, you piece of trash. Naoya growled, preparing to rush forward. But as he noticed the boy quickly punching the ground to pull out a piece of wood, Naoya's eyes narrowed in suspicion. What is he doing? Wondering, his doubts were quickly answered when the young sorcerer threw the piece of wood at the ceiling, splitting a support pillar that came crashing down toward the Zenin. Naoya saw this as a minor inconvenience, leaping to avoid the pillar. He turned toward Itadori, only to see another piece of wood hit the ceiling. But this time, instead of just one wooden pillar, the entire ceiling trembled, causing Naoya's eyes to widen. Damn it! Cursing as the ceiling began to collapse on him, he moved with his technique to avoid being crushed. But to his misfortune, his movements seemed to have been perfectly anticipated when his eyes widened, sensing a strong surge of cursed energy beside him. Black! Turning to see Itadori next to him, fist ready to strike, Naoya's mouth opened in disbelief. Flash! Itadori threw his punch, but instead of the usual feeling of hitting flesh with overwhelming power, only the resistance of air met his hand. His eyes widened in alarm. Did you really think I'd fall for that twice? Hearing a voice beside him, Itadori immediately tried to retreat, but a sharp slash to his throat made him stagger backward instead, blood gushing from the wound. Naoya, now holding a knife, smiled in satisfaction as he watched the boy clutch his neck in a futile attempt to stop the bleeding. You piece of trash! Kicking Itadori in the stomach, Naoya knocked him to the ground and quickly mounted over him. Know your damn place! With a sadistic grin, he stomped hard on the boy's throat, making him choke on his own blood. What's the matter? Where's all that confidence? Show me! Naoya kept pressing on the wound, his smile widening as Itadori raised a hand, seemingly asking him to stop. Want to beg for mercy? Don't be foolish. I'm just getting started. But just as he seemed to deny the plea for mercy, he grew confused when Itadori suddenly pointed to something beside him, his eyes narrowing as he turned to see a fist inches from his face. Huh! Boom! Black flash! Naoya was sent flying, crashing into the rubble of the fallen ceiling, blood streaming down his face as he struggled to breathe. The clone laughed at the sight and, turning to his original body, stood up while keeping pressure on the cut on his neck. You could have taken a little longer. Itadori chuckled at that and, placing a hand on his clone's shoulder, began to absorb him. Leave the rest to me. The clone nodded before merging completely with Itadori, the young sorcerer sighing as the memories came flooding into him. I have some unfinished business with this man. Stepping forward, Itadori watched as Naoya struggled to his feet, blood in his eyes preventing him from seeing properly as he groaned in pain. Damn you! You think everything will be fine after this? The other clans will hunt you down for attacking an ally, Naoya muttered between breaths, wiping the blood from his eyes as he stopped to glare at Itadori with a dark expression. How stupid did you have to be to attack us like this? Itadori remained silent, his eyes narrowing as he approached the sorcerer. Stupid? He asked, stopping in front of Naoya with an impassive face, which seemed to unsettle the Zenin, who took a step back. Look at your situation. Do you really think you're in a position to insult anyone? Naoya's eyes widened as the young sorcerer suddenly kicked, his mouth opening in a scream of pain as a loud crack echoed, his eyes dropping to see his knee shattered. Damn it! You bastard! Naoya cursed, saliva dripping from his lips as he clutched his broken leg. Screaming already? Standing imposingly over the injured Naoya, Itadori asked with a smile, his hands slowly coming together as cursed energy rapidly spread through his body. I'm just getting started. Domain expansion. Hunting territory. Naoya had always been surrounded by the untalented. He grew up in an environment where his genius and skill as a sorcerer were constantly praised. Only one person, in his eyes, could surpass him. Toji Zenin. As a child, upon learning that Toji was in the clan, he immediately rushed to meet him with the intention of mocking the clan's cursed energy-less trash, but upon meeting him, he immediately recognized the oppressive strength of the man. A strength that he acknowledged and respected. The Zenin clan only existed due to a whim of Toji's, and Naoya grew up knowing this, feeling as though he was one of the few who could understand Zenin. The sin of the insignificant is failing to understand true strength. With this in mind, Naoya grew up surrounded by those he considered insignificant. In his 27 years of life, he had never met anyone as talented as he and Toji. Because he was one of the few free from the ignorance of understanding true power. But, as much as he hated it, he couldn't deny what was right before his eyes. The ability to expand a domain was limited to a few sorcerers and curse users, so few that they could be counted on one hand. The opponent before him was, by no means, weak. But even so, Naoya would still be the last one standing. Receding in a flash of speed as a fist collided with the ground where he stood, Naoya shielded his face from the snow that scattered, his eyes narrowing as he watched Itadori turn to pursue him. Even with my broken leg, I can still use my technique. Disappearing as Itadori reached him, Naoya reappeared a few meters away. I can survive. He shouldn't be able to maintain his domain for long. Seeing Naoya afar, Itadori sighed in frustration. He had broken the Zenin's leg to prevent this, but it only seemed to slow him down slightly, which, at this point, would still help him escape. Naoya couldn't move freely, but he could still create a trajectory whenever he was in danger. Considering his reflexes, catching him would be somewhat difficult. The Zenin might survive under normal circumstances, but there was just one problem. Naoya was under his domain, and Itadori wasn't alone. Eyes widening as a cursed energy signature reached his senses, Naoya quickly turned to see a massive wolf about to clamp its jaws around his body. What the hell is this? Using his technique at the last second, he moved away just as the wolf dug its claws into the ground to stop its momentum, a growl escaping the massive creature as hot breath puffed from its mouth. A Shikigami? Naoya's eyes widened in disbelief. He had already dismissed the guaranteed effect of the domain as something that would affect him, since he was still alive, which had made him so confident in his survival. But with a Shikigami, his chances were much slimmer. If he wasn't careful, this could be the end. Afraid? With Itadori speaking as he took a few steps toward the Zenin, Naoya turned to him with narrowed eyes. You've always lived treating those around you with arrogance, as if none of them were worth anything. With the wolf now walking just behind the young sorcerer, Itadori continued. Men are only there to prove your strength and die for the clan. Women are just housewives, meant to follow the orders of men and bear their children. Eyes widening as the wolf suddenly lunged at him, Naoya quickly projected a trajectory far from the enormous creature, reappearing away from it. But how do you feel now? His eyes widened again as a voice sounded beside him. Naoya turned in haste, only to be slammed into the ground by a hand at his throat. To me, you're nothing but trash, a worm even worse than those high-ranking bastards. Itadori spoke with a tone full of coldness, his eyes staring down at the Zenin, who struggled to free himself from the grip on his neck with an indifferent expression. I'm being a little selfish by killing you, since others would have more reason to do it than me. With the grip tightening even more, Naoya grasped the sorcerer's wrist as tears began to well in the corners of his eyes, his face reddening as he struggled more and more to draw air into his lungs. So weak, so insignificant, be happy to know that you'll at least serve some purpose. With a small smile forming on Itadori's lips, Naoya felt terror as he noticed the wolf approaching, its golden eyes gleaming dangerously. Your technique isn't useless, so I'll take it. Effortlessly, Itadori lifted the Zenin off the ground while still holding his throat, Naoya immediately attempting to kick him to escape, only to freeze in shock when his body suddenly went completely stiff. Your death won't bring me much satisfaction, but what's about to happen will. With the boy's smile widening, he turned to his giant wolf. Amarok, devour him slowly. Let him feel everything. Naoya's eyes widened in horror, the desperation in his body intensifying as the wolf simply nodded and bared its sharp teeth. Very well. And throwing the Zenin right in front of Amarok, Itadori tapped the ground lightly, a throne of earth forming, courtesy of the technique of the elder of the clan that his clone had devoured earlier. Begin. Paralyzed by Itadori's gaze, Naoya could do nothing as the wolf loomed over him, its enormous mouth opening while the Zenin could only stare in despair. His choices in life had led to this moment. Facing a painful death, he could feel regret for his decisions. But his regret would never free him from the justice of men. Not even God could save him now. Walking through what was left of the Zenin clan with Maki and Mai on his shoulders, Itadori showed no emotion as he passed by the numerous bodies. Though he was responsible for much of the extermination, Itadori's clone wasn't responsible for all of it. Several dozens of remodeled curses also contributed to the chaos after the Hei squad was killed, as there were still many soldiers of the clan scattered around. It might seem a bit cruel, but Itadori didn't care at all for these people. There were no children, so he had no reason to feel bad. This was far from the situations in the past where he had to kill. The existence of the Zenin clan was insignificant to him and would do more good for the world by being destroyed. Letting them live could cause problems in the future. He wouldn't lie, saying that he hadn't planned to leave some of them alive, but that changed after he received Maki and Mai's memories. He decided to destroy everything at once. With Maki and Mai unconscious as he carried them, Itadori couldn't help but look at their sleeping faces. After their souls were separated, their bodies seemed to have been drained too much, but it appeared to have worked, as Maki didn't have a single trace of cursed energy in her body. As for Mai, her reserves had expanded to the point of surpassing a first-grade sorcerer, which was quite surprising. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she could reach that level with relative ease. Their wounds seemed to have healed somewhat with their awakening, at least enough for him to take them to Shoko safely. Stopping when he noticed movement among some rubble, Itadori raised an eyebrow when he saw something crawling beneath a few pieces of wood. Cough. Cough. Hearing the coughing, he soon realized it was a woman, who immediately widened her eyes upon seeing him. Itadori narrowed his eyes as he analyzed the woman. Her loose hair gave her a familiar appearance, a face that Itadori had seen before. A familiar face. As he seemed to think, Maki suddenly shifted on his shoulder, her newfound strength almost causing him to drop her before he regained his balance. And with realization dawning on him as he steadied Maki on his shoulder, he turned to the woman with surprised eyes. So this is their mother. Itadori stared at her silently, the woman looking back at him with terror on her face, her eyes shifting to her daughter's bodies before returning to the young sorcerer's face. And sighing, he just shrugged as he continued on his way. He preferred to leave that decision for one of the two in the future. Whether the woman would live or not, that would be entirely up to they. He wouldn't take that choice away from they. Megumi thought that getting Hikari as an ally would be a complicated task, considering the third-year student was known as a complete delinquent. When he found out that Hikari was managing an underground gambling house where fights between sorcerers took place, he felt that finding him would be difficult, but the sight before him was far from anything he could have expected. With Todoa's forehead colliding with Hikari's, the two sorcerers smiled as they began a test of strength. Hikari Kinji. Todo spoke as he struggled to hold his ground. Still into the same type of women? For sure. Hikari replied through gritted teeth, fighting to push the sorcerer back. And you? Still into that idol? Obviously. Great. From afar, Megumi, Nobara, and Kirara watched the interaction in silence, with Nobara being the most expressive, staring at the two men with a disappointed look. Idiots. She thought, sighing. Considering what Panda told us, about you not liking Jujutsu High, I thought there'd be a bit more resistance since we came on behalf of the school. Megumi spoke to Kirara beside him, the girl only shrugging. Todo never lied to us, plus, he's the worst opponent for my technique. Kirara said as she smiled at Hikari's animated face. We saw no reason not to hear your reasons for coming. And it really wasn't anything we could have expected. That's why we need you. The more help, the better. Megumi turned to the two sorcerers locked in a contest. So it'd be great if you could call that guy over so we can talk. Kinchan's on fire right now, I don't think I can stop him. Kirara said with a loving smile, her eyes fixed on Hikari. And I love it when he's like this. Damn it. Nobara snapped, and pulling out her hammer, she prepared to run towards the two sorcerers. I'm going to hit them both on the head. No. But Megumi stopped her with a tired sigh. Just let them finish this. Hikari. Todo. Idiots. They're stable, you don't need to worry. In the recently renovated infirmary, after a certain someone flooded everything, Shoko moved to sit in a chair while lighting a cigarette, her eyes landing on the pink-haired boy sitting near Maki and Mai's beds. That's great. Itadori nodded in satisfaction. Thank you for that, Miss Shoko. No need to thank me, it's just my job. Shoko blew out some smoke as she replied. But I'm curious. The changes in these two are quite noticeable, what did you do? Itadori remained silent, his eyes fixed on the peaceful faces of the two sleeping girls for a moment before turning back to Shoko. Monozygotic twins are considered the same being, their souls are intimately connected. That's correct. Shoko seemed surprised for a moment. Even though the birth of twins was seen as a bad omen due to the bond between them being a common idea in the Jujutsu world, it was still quite surprising for someone like Itadori, who had been a sorcerer for such a short time, to know that. She remembered Gojo saying that Itadori was someone who worked hard and often asked him for books on Jujutsu society, but Shoko didn't think the boy had delved so deep. This connection directly affects Jujutsu. And declaring this with certainty, Itadori crossed his arms as he turned again to the two girls. Maki should have been born without a single trace of cursed energy, someone free from the shackles of the Jujutsu world. Shoko's eyes widened at that information, and turning to Maki, she noticed how she couldn't sense any cursed energy from her body. Meanwhile she should have been born with high reserves of cursed energy, as you may have noticed now. Shoko nodded to all of that, turning to Itadori for explanations. To achieve this result, I simply separated their interconnected souls. And as if it were a simple task, he declared, which made Shoko blink slowly. It wasn't difficult, really. I think the psychological factor of not knowing the outcome was what made the process harder. Itadori nodded to himself, a smug smile on his lips. Mahito's technique isn't that hard to use. Right. Shoko sighed. Itadori had some traits remarkably similar to Gojo, and she didn't see that as a good thing. By the way, since I have time, I'd like to ask you something. Itadori turned to Shoko, a determined glint in his eyes. Shoko raised an eyebrow at that, blowing out a bit of smoke, and gestured for him to continue. Because of my miracles and the first time Sukuna took over my body, I remember the sensation of reverse cursed energy, but every time I try to replicate it, I feel like there's a barrier blocking me. He began, cursed energy accumulating in his hand as he lifted it. I'm not asking for an explanation, but I'd like to hear your experiences. I want to know how it feels for you when you use the technique. Shoko stared at him for a few seconds, simply blowing the smoke she was inhaling from her cigarette. The boy was, indeed, more intelligent than his appearance might suggest. Not only was his talent immense, but his skill seemed to be a step above. His ability to control cursed energy surpassed that of a first-grade sorcerer, considerably outclassing his peers. His reserve seemed to be growing at a rapid pace, which was something impossible for most sorcerers, and on top of that, he appeared to be on the verge of unlocking reverse cursed energy. Was she truly witnessing the rise of another Satoru Gojo? It seemed almost unthinkable. But it was right before her eyes. Not only did this boy have as much potential as Satoru Gojo, but he also had the attitude, given that he had been the one to initiate a direct attack on the higher-ups. Something even Satoru had avoided, preferring to follow their orders and clean up their messes. All right. Shoko nodded, which brought a satisfied smile to Yuji's face. If this boy had the potential to become a second Satoru Gojo, the least she could do was help him. No, as an adult and a sorcerer, she had to make him better. She had neglected her duties as a sorcerer for too long, and with Gojo's ceiling, she could see that more clearly. In the end, she was still a mentor to the new generation. She could at least do that job right this time. Blocking a powerful kick, Itadori gritted his teeth as he stepped back quickly, his eyes tracking the movement of his opponent charging toward him. Damn, I knew he was strong. After taking a powerful punch to his defense, Itadori forced a nervous smile as he staggered backward. But I didn't think it would be this much. Regaining control, he immediately tried to counter his target, but as soon as he launched his attack, he was surprised when a sweep knocked him down on his back, a blade appearing right in front of his eyes. Keep your eyes on your opponent, don't lose focus, or it could be fatal. With the voice guiding him, Itadori sighed as he sat up when the blade was pulled away from his face. Yes, sir. Itadori nodded, and lifting his head to look at the one teaching him, he smiled upon seeing Nanami's back. Nanami was a competent sorcerer, someone worthy of being considered the strongest first grade at Jujutsu High. Itadori could notice the difference in his cursed energy control. It was more meticulous and only became chaotic when necessary. That was what made his strikes so painful. Maintaining control over his cursed energy until the last second, he unleashed blows with enough force to injure even special grade curses. Nanami was a deadly opponent for anyone with intermediate strength. That was why, despite Gojo being a decent teacher, Itadori saw Nanami as a better mentor. When it came to raw power and enhancement through cursed energy, the two complemented each other. Get up, let's get something to eat. Nanami ordered as he sheathed his blade. All right. Itadori nodded as he pushed himself up, a tired sigh escaping his lips as he felt his sore muscles. Damn, you could take it a bit easy. I was taking it easy. Seriously? Itadori opened his mouth in disbelief before quickly shaking his head with a hint of discouragement. Wow. Regaining his composure, he fell into step beside Nanami, who began walking to exit the training room they were in. As they walked, Itadori shook his arm to relieve the discomfort, turning to Nanami as he suddenly remembered something. Did something happen at Junpei's house? Confronted with the question, Nanami maintained his stoic expression as he continued walking. The managers haven't reported anything, so it seems everything is fine. That's good. Itadori nodded in satisfaction, a calm smile appearing on his lips. After retrieving his finger from Junpei's house, Itadori made his concerns clear to Ijichi, the assistant director, taking his words into account and leaving some managers to monitor the boy's house. He wanted to avoid Mahito's approach at all costs, considering that with Junpei's mother still alive, the curse could find another way to manipulate him. Itadori actually wanted to bring Junpei under the wings of JujutsuGuy as soon as possible, but that decision would take time due to the elders needing to assess whether Junpei was a threat or not. Itadori doubted it was just that. In fact, he believed the elders were merely wasting time instead of doing their jobs. Sighing, he pushed those thoughts aside. At the end of the day, he could only wait. Fortunately, with Junpei's mother saved and Mahito far away, Itadori doubted the boy would become a user of curses. What would you like to eat, Itadori? Blinking when Nanami suddenly asked, Itadori turned with a bit of confusion, his face becoming thoughtful. I think pork would be great. Nanami nodded, seeming to ponder this option for a moment before replying. Pork, then. Itadori smiled contentedly, and turning to face the silent Nanami beside him, he realized. Even after a month training alongside him, he had never stopped to learn more about the sorcerer. It felt a bit rude, considering Nanami was the one helping him improve his control over cursed energy. Not showing interest in his story felt somehow disrespectful. But with the silence between them as they walked to leave the building, Itadori saw this as a perfect opportunity to understand a bit more about the person Nanami was, since in his old life, despite liking the sorcerer, Itadori hadn't delved deeply into his story and motivations. Hey, Nanami. Calling out to the sorcerer, he watched Nanami turn to him with an eyebrow raised in question. What made you return to active duty as a sorcerer? I remember the sensei saying you had stepped away. Nanami kept his serious gaze, but despite that, he didn't seem offended by the personal question. Instead, his expression softened as he remembered the time he was working in an office. I realized that the life of a salaried worker and the life of a jujutsu sorcerer end up being quite similar, so in the end, I just had to choose whether to live with or without regrets. Adjusting his glasses, he began. So, if during my life I can earn the appreciation of a few people, then for me, that's enough. Itadori nodded silently, focused on listening to the sorcerer's words. Don't get me wrong, I still hate all this. I still see the work of a sorcerer as a job for crazy people, but someone has to do it, whether they want to or not. Stopping in his tracks, he turned to Itadori, leaving the young sorcerer confused. But I don't want you to feel obligated to all this, Itadori. With a soft gaze, he told Itadori sincerely. This idea that sorcerers must sacrifice themselves for a greater good, I don't want you to take that to heart. If we, the adults, force the youth to sacrifice their lives, then we're nothing but trash. The death of your companions should never be seen as something expected. With his hand resting on the boy's shoulder, Nanami continued firmly. I returned because I wanted to live without regrets, but it was also because I didn't want young people like you to have to go through what I went through. Opening his eyes slowly, Itadori absorbed that memory for a moment before turning to the bed in front of him, his eyes moving over the body of a sleeping and completely bandaged Nanami. Live without regrets. He whispered, his gaze landing on Nanami's face, completely covered in bandages. Thank you for that, Nanami. And letting cursed energy dance around his hand, Itadori showed a determined look. I will strive to live without regrets. Outside Jujutsu High, two figures suddenly appeared, their gazes filled with memories wandering over the entrance leading to the school's facilities. It's a bit strange coming back here after everything. One of them said, the figure beside her nodding in agreement. Definitely. And with a sigh, the figure pulled out her phone. He said he would be waiting for us here. Do you think he's messing with us? No, our contract still stands. He wouldn't break it without suffering serious penalties. Right. The two girls exchanged glances for a moment before sighing in disappointment. And here we are, the girls, who are late. Let's go find him, then. And with the two figures starting to move away, their faces were finally revealed to show two beautiful young women. Be careful, Nanako. You too, Mimiko. Staring at the white ceiling and smelling the familiar scent of alcohol, Mai remained silent as she continued lying in her bed. After waking up, she decided to just stay there for a while, taking some time to think about everything that had happened. Without a doubt, she should have been dead. When Oji cut her and her father told her what he planned to do, she immediately decided what she would do. It had been some time since she learned about the twins' curse, some time since she realized that as long as she stayed around, Maki would remain weak. To gain something, you need to sacrifice something else. Just like going through painful experiences makes you stronger. But that didn't work for twins. Even if one of them pushed themselves to the point of exhaustion, if the other didn't do the same, nothing would change. While Maki struggled every day to improve herself, Mai had no intention of getting stronger. That's why she made up her mind the moment she saw Maki bravely standing in front of Oji Zenin. She would sacrifice herself to give her sister a chance to end everything. But all her plans were ruined when Itadori Yuji suddenly appeared, catching her by surprise, but at the same time, filling her with hope. Although she was determined to sacrifice herself, she wouldn't lie and say she didn't care about dying. She feared death like any normal person and wanted to keep living. So when Itadori appeared as a savior, she felt so grateful. She knew, thanks to Todo, that the boy should be as strong as he was. He could take them and get them out of there. But that seemed far from what actually happened. Because while he carried them out of the clan, Mai woke up, and even though she was disoriented, she could still make out her surroundings. Needless to say, she was shocked. The scene of destruction around her, the piled-up bodies of the clan members, and her mother struggling to free herself from the rubble, all of this brought an indescribable sense of relief to her, a relief so strong in her chest that it nearly brought her to tears. And she would have cried if she hadn't passed out shortly after when Itadori suddenly accelerated at a terrifying speed. That's why, lying in that bed, she could only muster a grateful smile, tears forming in the corners of her eyes as she sniffled silently. Her hands moved to her face in a futile attempt to hide the tears of happiness and relief that started streaming down her cheeks. The feeling of gratitude in her chest at that moment was immense. She had so much to thank the one who had not only saved her but also saved her sister, the only person Mai loved deeply. Wiping the tears from her eyes, she turned to see Maki sleeping peacefully, which made her smile tenderly. But blinking when she noticed she couldn't sense her sister's cursed energy, she looked at her own hands as she realized something strange. My reserves. Why do they feel so full? She thought in confusion, and seeing the cursed energy dancing around her hand, she swallowed hard. And if I... Trying to form a single revolver bullet with her technique, she was startled when hundreds of shells fell onto her bed. She quickly stood up, watching in confusion as the countless bullets scattered to the floor. What? What does this mean? She wondered, and turning to Maki, she sighed when she saw her still asleep. I need to find him and ask what's happening. Moving urgently toward the door, she quickly left the room, determined to find Itadori. But as Mai hurried away, Back in the room, Maki suddenly moved, her eyes slowly opening as a yawn escaped her lips. After talking with Shoko about reverse cursed energy, Itadori had finally taken some time to rest. He hadn't slept properly since the day before, and combined with the fact that he had exerted himself creating a clone and even expanded his domain, needless to say, he didn't have much energy left. Shoko's explanation didn't help much either. Even with her trying hard to explain, Itadori simply couldn't understand a third of what she was saying. Maybe it was due to his tired mind, but he doubted fuo and hayoi could mean anything. At that moment, he believed asking Yuta might have been a better option. Sigh. But with a sigh, he decided to push those thoughts aside. Sorcerers evolved in moments of risk, so he knew he'd figure it out at the right time. Moving toward the bed, Itadori lay down, the comfort of the mattress bringing relief to his entire body as he relaxed his muscles. Nothing compared to lying in a comfortable bed after a hard day's work. He didn't need to look in the mirror to notice the bags under his eyes. His heavy eyelids were indication enough. For now, he'd take a nap before getting ready. He had a lot to do, but a few hours of sleep shouldn't hurt too much. As sleep quickly overtook him the moment he closed his eyes, his breathing became calm as he entered the realm of dreams. But as he seemed to have fallen asleep, he failed to notice the sound of footsteps outside his room. Unprotected, his body didn't even stir when the door opened, revealing a figure with dark hair entering carefully. Is that his trace of cursed energy? My senses also seem to have improved. Mai whispered, her eyes wandering around the tidy room as she appeared curious. Are those posters about astrology? He likes stars? Noticing Itadori seemed to be asleep, she felt a bit bolder about snooping. Maybe it was because he was supposed to be strong, but Mai felt at ease around the boy. Besides, based on what she had heard from Toto, she doubted he'd get angry about it. Is that a telescope? Mai was surprised when she noticed a telescope by the window, her eyes gleaming for a moment as she approached it. He really seems to like stars. Her fingers lightly moved across the surface of the object, curiosity evident on her face as she tried to observe what Itadori was interested in. And she couldn't help but be surprised when she saw a small point shimmering in a bluish-white tone. What is that? She wondered, and stepping away from the telescope, she noticed some notes on a nearby desk, her attention drawn to a name full of annotations. Sirius B. Visibility orbit, compact energy, density, unparalleled explosive power. Mai skimmed through the notes for a few seconds before losing interest. He seemed to be studying it. I'll never understand these sorcerers. Startled when Itadori suddenly moved in his sleep, Mai turned to see the sorcerer sleeping peacefully, her lips tightening as she began to approach the bed carefully. When she paused to think about the previous events, the feeling of gratitude burned in her chest, but it wasn't just that. I'm not leaving without the two of you. Those words echoed in her mind, a statement full of confidence that gave Mai chills. His proud gaze, as if Oji was nothing more than an annoyance in his way. It fascinated Mai. She didn't like sorcerers. To be fair, she hated the life they chose, she hated being dragged into it. But what girl doesn't like a brave prince risking his life to save the princess? Mai was interested, no doubt about it. She wasn't a naive or inexperienced girl. Unlike her sister, she was able to understand her own feelings. And Itadori Yuji had caught her attention. Beyond the deep gratitude for saving her and her sister and destroying the clan she hated so much, there was also a new feeling. A feeling of interest, a budding attraction caused by the proud eyes and actions of this young sorcerer. A feeling Mai wouldn't deny. Placing one knee on the bed, Mai quickly mounted the sleeping Itadori, firmly sitting on his lap as her lips tightened. For a moment, she even forgot the reason she was there, her eyes wandering over the boy's peaceful face as she leaned in. Mai had lived long enough, learned many things during her life, and so she knew. If you felt grateful to someone, the least you could do was reward them. Unconventional, but this was the way Mai felt appropriate to reward the man who had saved her. But she wouldn't lie and say she didn't want to do it. Because yes, she wanted to do this. Opening his eyes slowly when an unusual sensation disturbed his sleep, Itadori blinked as he felt something wet touch his lips, his vision still blurry from just waking up, preventing him from understanding what was happening. What is this? He wondered groggily, and blinking a few times to clear his vision, his eyes slowly widened in shock as he noticed a female face right in front of his, the sensation of his lips being taken making everything even more shocking. Am I being harassed? In the infirmary room, Maki moved slowly as she began to open her eyes, a numbing sensation spreading through her entire body before her vision fully adjusted, immediately noticing the white walls and the recognizable smell of alcohol. Her thoughts were quick, and she understood that she was there thanks to Itadori. But as soon as this recognition came to her, she turned almost desperately, her eyes landing on a second bed, empty but disheveled. An indication that someone else had been in that room with her. Mai. Whispering her sister's name, whom she had seen with a nearly fatal wound, Maki got up and prepared to go search for her. But the moment she stepped forward, she was startled when the ground beneath her feet trembled, her gaze shifting downward to notice a crack where she had stepped. What? Her eyes widened in surprise, and lifting her hand, she slowly closed her fingers into a fist, amazed as a loud sound of air pressure escaping from between her fingers echoed. This strength. Is it mine? She stared at her hands in fascination, feeling that tremendous new power coursing through her muscles, a sense that if she wasn't careful, she could destroy everything around her. It was hypnotizing. Mai. But setting it aside for now, she refocused, and carefully handling her newfound strength, she left the room to search for her sister. She could explore this new power at will later, but she needed to know if Mai was alright immediately. And as she walked with nearly cautious steps, her eyes narrowed when she noticed footsteps in the distance, her head turning toward the end of the hallway to see a figure emerging. Oh. But as the figure revealed itself, a sound of surprise escaped her lips, her eyes blinking in recognition upon seeing Maki. Hey. You. But not allowing the figure to continue, Maki rushed toward her with terrifying speed, grabbing the figure by the shoulder and pinning her against the wall. Wait. And up close, Maki could take a good look at the person in front of her, soon realizing it was the same girl from Suguru Geto's attack, Nanako, if Maki remembered correctly. We're allies. Nanako explained quickly. Naturally, she wouldn't have surrendered so easily, but with her wrists pinned against the wall, there wasn't much she could do, especially since she hadn't even noticed the sorcerer's movement. What do you mean? Maki raised an eyebrow in question. Allies? She found that hard to believe. Explain yourself, now. Nanako swallowed before nodding quickly. We made a binding vow with Itadori Yuji, the vessel of Sukuna. Maki was surprised for a moment, but she didn't doubt Itadori's intentions. If the boy had truly made a vow with the curse user in front of her, there must be a logical reason behind it. But she couldn't leave her curiosity aside, so she didn't hold back from asking. What kind of binding vow? Nanako remained silent for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she turned to Maki with seriousness, her face showing a hint of anger that Maki noticed. In exchange for having me and my sister as indefinite allies, the vessel of Sukuna will kill the one who stole Suguru Geto's body. She repeated as she remembered the day the vow was made, her words making Maki stare at her for several seconds. Maki pondered this for a moment but couldn't fully understand Itadori's intentions behind it. However, considering that he wanted them as allies, she doubted it could be something malicious. In fact, she felt a strange confidence regarding Itadori. Maybe it was because this was the second time she survived thanks to him? Or because they trained together almost every day? She couldn't say for certain, but she could feel her trust in the boy was greater than ever. Maybe she should let this go. Alright. Releasing Nanako, Maki stepped back to allow the girl to rub her wrists, which were marked by the sorcerer's fingers. Thank you. Nanako thanked her with a relieved sigh. We were called here by him, so my sister and I were trying to find him. Maki nodded, and although she still didn't fully trust Nanako, she could trust Itadori. Follow me, I think I know where he might be. Even so, she wouldn't let Nanako go unsupervised. In his previous life, Itadori had been a fully grown man, someone who, despite being quite disciplined, knew how to enjoy life's pleasures. He wasn't someone easily excited, especially since he had had a beautiful wife who could fulfill all his desires. But unlike his former life, in his fully developed body, his current body was not that of an adult man. It was a young body, full of hormones and desires that Itadori had put aside due to the overwhelmingly urgent problems he had to face. But now, in this very moment, with a beautiful woman sitting firmly on his lap, he realized that had been a mistake. He felt restrained, as if he were about to explode. Damn! But no matter how much his body wanted this, he was too conscious to let it go that far. Gently pushing Mai's shoulders, he pulled her lips away, his eyes shifting to her face to notice her eyes glowing with a seductive gleam, which didn't help the situation at all. What are you doing? He asked seriously, his narrowed eyes indicating that he didn't seem to support her move. And seeing this, Mai simply placed a finger on his lips, a small mischievous smile on her face. I'm just repaying you for what you did for me and my sister. Itadori looked at her in silence before letting out a sigh. This isn't appropriate, No. But cutting him off, Mai continued. I want this. I want to repay you. She spoke sincerely, her hands resting gently on his shoulders as she brought their faces closer. We're only alive because of you, so please, let me do this. Don't think I'm forcing myself. Itadori pressed his lips together at her words. He couldn't use the fact that they didn't know each other well because that was far from the truth. Itadori, at this point, might easily be the person who knew Mai the best, given that he had deeply accessed her soul and had seen not only her memories but also felt many of her emotions. He felt a strange connection to her, and he believed this was largely due to that fact. Not having interacted personally with her wouldn't stop him from continuing, given that he had delved into her mind. But even so, he didn't feel comfortable with it. He had also delved deeply into Maki's soul, and unlike Mai, he had already liked her before. Being involved with Maki's sister. No matter the justifications, he would still feel bad about himself. But this feeling, this desire not only from his body but from his soul, which had reached the deepest parts of Mai's mind, was completely at odds with his own mind. I want this. Feeling the hairs on his body stand on end from her sweet voice and her seductive yet pleading look, Itadori pressed his lips as his body began to heat up. Screw it. And giving in to her advances, he gripped her waist firmly and pulled her close, sealing her lips with a kiss that Mai promptly returned. The tension in his body, the frustration of having his precious memories altered, the weight of the responsibility of knowing the future on his shoulders. Itadori decided that after everything, he needed to release it. It might seem like the act of a scoundrel, but the truth was that Itadori had never been a noble white knight. He was a sorcerer. Well, you got what you wanted, so keep the prize. I hope you like it, or not, I don't know. In that small room where they had shared a kiss, their bodies were entangled as they kissed each other incessantly. It might not have been Yuji's first time. Being an adult, he had experienced moments like these countless times before, but that didn't stop him from enjoying it and feeling good. His experience was put to the test as he let his hands explore Mai's body in a way that left her defenseless against his touch. Mai, less experienced, savored the kiss, the sensation of their lips touching, though simple, bringing her a sense of inexplicable, almost addictive ecstasy. If the kiss was nearly addictive, his caresses were certainly so. She felt her hair stand on end, her skin growing sensitive as her body trembled with pleasure. This was the first time I felt something like this, the feeling of being desired, with eyes only for her. She loved it, and when Itadori's hands moved under her shirt, she eagerly parted her lips to let their tongues meet. She wouldn't deny being embarrassed. Though she wasn't exactly innocent, being touched with such desire and with such care made it impossible to stop the warm blush that spread over her cheeks. Their bodies pressed closer against each other, as if they wanted to be even nearer. It was intoxicating for both of them. As two young people with hormones running wild, each holding back so much, it was impossible for them to restrain themselves in a moment like this. This might have been the first time they had such close contact, and though the words exchanged between them before could be counted on one hand, in this moment, they were like two lovers who hadn't seen each other for months, their long-contained desires finally unleashed all at once. The cool air from the air conditioner touched their skin, warmth shared between their bodies, the resonance of their souls being so close, it all made the situation unavoidable. Besides, by this point, neither of them wanted to stop. With a sigh, their lips parted, a string of saliva connecting their tongues as they caught their breath for a moment. Their eyes met briefly, and Itadori seemed to seek her approval to continue, only for Mai to answer him with eyes full of desire. A more than valid answer for him. Instead of returning to regular kisses, Itadori surprised Mai when he leaned toward her neck, making her release a faint moan as he began to plant kisses and love bites. His hands proved to be quite mischievous, as they moved from her waist to firmly grab the woman's backside. This drew a sly smile from Mai, who clutched Itadori's head as he began to move his kisses downward. To think such an innocent face could be so bold. Itadori smiled at her words, and while one hand appreciated the softness of her rear, he used the other to gently touch her waist under her shirt. "Don't judge a book by its cover, princess." Mai bit her lip at his touch, her blush deepening as, catching Yuji by surprise, she pushed him forcefully onto the bed, letting her feel the friend hidden in his pants that, by this point, seemed eager to rebel against the world. "Noted, my prince." Licking her lips, Mai let her hand roam over the sorcerer's chest, her eyes shining with interest as she felt his defined muscles, before her gaze landed on the firmly pitched tent in his pants. "Someone's quite excited." "That's good to hear, it means I'm healthy." Sealing his lips with a kiss, Mai let her hand rest over his pants, Itadori sighing at the touch. Mai seemed determined to continue, if her eyes filled with desire, almost pleading, weren't enough indication. But there was a question that needed to be asked at a moment like this, even though they both wanted this. And it was Itadori who had to ask it. "Hey." Calling her attention suddenly, their eyes met, and Mai looked surprised when she noticed Itadori gazing at her with careful, gentle eyes. "Are you sure?" A simple question, one that most couples asked each other before sharing their first time. Something so simple that, in moments of passion, could easily be ignored, just to carry on quickly. But despite its simplicity, Mai oddly felt different about the gesture, felt touched. The affectionate eyes of the one before her brought a feeling to her chest that Mai had rarely felt in her life, her heart racing, and the blood in her face warming like never before. Mai couldn't explain why she felt that way, as she couldn't even adequately describe it. But one thing was certain. She wanted Yuji Itadori now more than ever. So, she didn't hold back as she nearly threw herself against the young sorcerer, their lips meeting as she slid her tongue into his mouth. Was she sure? That was the most genuine answer she could give. And Itadori gladly accepted it. With the passionate kiss they shared, their hands continued as they began undressing each other quickly, their clothes discarded and tossed aside as they refused to stop feeling each other's bodies. Two young people in heat. If there were a painting to describe the current moment, that would undoubtedly be its title. Because they didn't pause their exchange of affection for a single second, with Itadori positioning himself above Mai as he kissed her belly, before slowly beginning to descend. Mai bit her lip at this, and when Itadori settled in front of her slit, now wet with her dripping desire, she held his hair as he leaned in even closer. She released a moan when Itadori licked her slit, her fingers gripping his hair tighter as he squeezed her thighs, continuing to explore her sensitive spots. It didn't take more than a few seconds before, after deep exploration, Mai's body trembled as she let out a loud moan, panting as if she'd just run a marathon. Itadori licked his lips, unable to hide his satisfaction. It seemed he still had some skills, even after months focused solely on exorcising curses. "Want a break?" he asked with a smug tone. Mai, who was beginning to regulate her breathing, looked down to see the expression on the young sorcerer's face. "How are you so good?" she asked, genuinely shocked, to which Itadori just shrugged as he moved to be above her, their faces close enough to feel each other's warm breath. "I don't know, maybe it's talent." Mai let out a light laugh at that, and hugging his neck, she leaned in to whisper in his ear, "Then show me a little more of that talent, stud. Itadori felt his hair stand on end at that, his tip throbbing in front of Mai's slit, almost as if it had a life of its own. "With pleasure." And with both of them completely ignoring the world around them, Itadori brought their faces close to seal her lips with a kiss, their tongues entwining as his tip lightly brushed Mai's slit, enough for him to feel her essence. As they enjoyed the moment, the bed sheet covering their bodies full of excitement, they didn't even notice the sound of footsteps approaching down the hall. They were brought back to reality when, interrupting the moment as they were about to make things even more serious, a knock sounded at the door, alerting the two young people in the room. Itadori immediately sat up upon hearing the knock, Mai propping herself up on her elbows as she turned to look at the door. "Itadori?" And it was with a voice familiar to both of them that they realized the situation they were in. They were caught. Walking through the corridors with Nanako following close behind, Maki narrowed her eyes, allowing her new senses to give her a fresh perception. She could clearly hear the girl's footsteps right behind her, even picking up on her nervousness. Whatever had happened to her, not only had her physical abilities skyrocketed to a new level, but all of her senses had also been enhanced. To the point that it was impossible for her not to notice the sounds coming from the dormitories. What the hell is going on? A vein popped on Maki's forehead, and her anger became apparent as Nanako flinched at the sudden mood change. "Here I was worried, but what are those two doing?" Clicking her tongue, Maki turned irritably to face Nanako, who immediately took a few steps back, startled. "Follow me." With that command, Maki started moving at a brisk pace, Nanako blinking as the sorcerer moved away before sighing. "Is she bipolar?" the curse user wondered, then quickly followed Maki. Still unaccustomed, Maki struggled to correctly pinpoint the sound's origin, as her ability to hear voices at long distances also seemed to include all sorts of ambient noises. So, finding the room where the sound originated took longer than expected. Standing in front of the door, she could hear the words spoken by the two inside the room quite clearly. "Then show me more of that talent, stud. With pleasure." Understanding the implications of those words, Maki felt her chest tighten, a feeling she knew the origin of but had preferred to bury beneath her goal of becoming a great sorcerer. She felt a bit defeated, maybe even a bit betrayed. An unjustifiable feeling, after all. Even though she and Itadori had shown some bond during training, nothing had been formalized. Either of them was free to be with anyone they wanted. But despite knowing this, Maki still felt a bit irritated. While she'd been worried looking for them, they'd been too busy wrapped up in each other. Damn, control yourself, Maki, she repeated to herself and, with a sigh, turned to the door. I have more important things to worry about than this. Knocking on the door, she hardly cared when the wood shook from her strong knocks, her eyes narrowing as she heard the two inside stop their activities. Itadori? Are you in there? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Perhaps she just wanted to embarrass them a little. Her irritation had lessened but hadn't completely disappeared. Hearing the chaotic footsteps inside the room, Maki didn't bother to knock again as she gripped the door handle. But just as she was about to force the lock, she blinked as the door was pulled from its hinges by her tremendous strength. Her gaze turned forward only to see Itadori, dressed only in pants, and Mai wearing his shirt over her bare body, both looking utterly shocked. Behind Maki, Nanako gaped at the sight, her hand slowly raising her phone before a camera click sounded. Oh. Itadori looked a bit nervous, especially under Maki's cold stare. Hey, Maki. This only sharpened Maki's gaze further, especially as she noticed Mai tugging the edges of Itadori's shirt down, looking nervous. Why does this feel like catching someone cheating? Itadori wondered, noticing the vibe of the situation. After dressing appropriately, the three sorcerers sat at a cafeteria table, surrounded by a notably tense atmosphere. Nanako and Mimiko, seated at a nearby table, watched the situation curiously. What happened? Mimiko asked, curious. I don't know, but it seems kind of complicated, Nanako replied with a shrug. At the sorcerer's table, Itadori silently observed the hostile tension among the three, mostly emanating from Maki. To be honest, in his excitement, he hadn't even considered the possibility of Maki catching them. A mistake on his part, especially given how much he liked the sorcerer. But he wouldn't put too much weight on it. He was an adult, knew what he did, and why he did it. There were no excuses. After all, he hadn't done anything wrong. But honestly, Itadori wasn't sure if Mai wanted anything more with him. Even if she said it was just a one-time thing, the sentiment in their affectionate exchanges was undeniable. He wouldn't lie and say he felt nothing for Mai. Having delved so deeply into these two souls, that was impossible. How wrong. Itadori wiped his face as a lascivious thought crept into his mind, an image of Maki and Mai lying in wait for him. So much for becoming a man of integrity and respect. With a sigh, Itadori looked back at Mai, noticing how, unlike Maki, she seemed satisfied despite her nervousness, not too shaken by her sister's discovery. The young sorcerer observed this for a few moments, Mai noticed and sent him a smile. Hey! But interrupting them, Maki called out, her gaze calmer yet still showing hints of irritation. I don't care what you two were doing, we don't have time to waste on this. Itadori nodded in agreement. Although he wanted to talk with Maki properly, he knew they didn't have the luxury of wasting time right now. For now, Itadori wanted to focus on solving the problem with Tsumaki. Now that he'd managed to disentangle the souls of twins, he felt confident about undoing Yorozu's incarnation, though he doubted it would be an easy task. He could remember the fight between Sukuna and Yorozu and knew that the perfect sphere of the feminine incarnation was a powerful technique. Itadori doubted that anything in his arsenal could counter it. But he still had time and a few ideas for the upcoming battle. What happened with that clan of idiots? Maki asked, getting straight to the point. There was no reason to waste time. She wanted to know what had been going on with the Zenin clan and, especially, why her body felt so different. Itadori crossed his arms as she confronted him with the question, and Mai beside him looked uncertain about what to do. She wanted to speak but didn't know if Itadori intended to keep anything hidden. Even though it was her sister in front of them, Itadori was still her benefactor, so she didn't want to overstep. But fortunately, Itadori seemed to have no intention of hiding anything, as he answered without hesitation. I unraveled the entanglement of your souls, meaning you two are no longer limiting each other. And besides that, I destroyed the clan completely. The impact of this statement made Maki widen her eyes in complete surprise, and even Mai, who already knew the second part, looked shocked. Even Nanako and Mimiko, overhearing from afar, were taken aback. A single person capable of wiping out an entire clan? It sounded like a joke, though not because it was impossible. After all, they knew Geto. But it was shocking because the one responsible was younger than them. That's why Mai's cursed energy reserves increased so much, and why you, Maki, are physically stronger. Now you're completely free from cursed energy. Itadori continued, noting how Maki looked even more astonished, her eyes shining in recognition as something seemed to click. She must have thought of Toji, he concluded. I see. Maki nodded, crossing her arms over her chest, sighing with a bit of relief. I won't lie and say I'm pleased with this. They deserved it, but if someone had to do it, I would have preferred it to be me. Consider it karma. Itadori gave a wry smile, remembering Naoya's horrified look for a moment before pushing those memories aside. And how long have we been asleep? How are the others? Just a day, don't worry, Itadori reassured her. Megumi and the others made contact with Hikari. They're currently preparing to enter the colonies to earn points. I'll join them, and since you're likely undetectable by the barriers now, it'd be great if you could be our messenger. All right. Maki nodded, quickly understanding her role. And Mai. Turning to Mai, he called her. It'd be best if you stayed here while you get used to your new cursed energy reserves. Now that you're no longer limited, the potential of your technique is undeniable. Mai nodded, her face looking unsure. You don't have to, if you don't want to. Staying safe is enough, Itadori immediately reassured her, sensing her hesitation. He knew Mai hated the idea of becoming a sorcerer. Understood, thanks. Mai smiled at his concern. Maki watched this interaction with surprise. Seeing such a caring and friendly Mai wasn't common. But considering what had happened earlier, it was easy to deduce the reason for this change. And you too. Nanako and Mimiko jumped as Itadori suddenly pointed at them, making them turn slowly to look at him. I also need to discuss something with you too, but we'll do that later. The two exchanged glances for a moment before nodding at his words. Satisfied, Itadori turned back to the two Zenin women, a goofy smile on his lips as Maki looked at him skeptically. What? You idiot. From that point onward, two main objectives could not be ignored under any circumstances. The rescue of Tsumaki and the defeat of Kenjaku. While the second objective was more critical and urgent, the moment Tsumaki revealed herself as a vessel would be the ideal time to confront her. However, the fight against Kenjaku required Itadori's full attention, making it difficult to split his efforts between the two goals. If he created a clone to face Tsumaki, it would be defeated with ease, and if he did the same with Kenjaku, the outcome would be even worse. This left him at an impasse. To fight Yorozu, he needed to be inside a colony. Moreover, Itadori doubted he'd be in any shape to face someone of her caliber immediately after a battle against Kenjaku, given the limited recovery time he'd have. Fortunately, he had a plan to address this issue, one that heavily involved the two girls in front of him. Nanako and Mimiko. Well, his plan relied more on Nanako. Nanako's curse technique was intriguing and had numerous applications that could be lethal in the hands of a skilled sorcerer. However, offensive capabilities weren't Itadori's primary focus at the moment. Instead, it was her ability for transportation. With her technique, Nanako could bring elements of a photo into the real world, essentially a weak and limited form of spatial manipulation. Teleportation was entirely possible, provided she pushed herself. That was what Itadori needed. There were some events within the colonies that Itadori didn't want to miss, so he wanted to rely on Nanako's teleportation technique. "Do you understand?" he asked, observing the uncertain expressions on the girls' faces. "It's a long distance. I don't know if I can move someone that far." Nanako replied hesitantly. "That's why Mimiko will assist you. And if the lack of cursed energy becomes an issue, you can turn to Mai," Itadori explained. He could empathize with their concerns. The distance required for the teleportation was enormous and would demand tremendous effort. But if they wanted the imposter in Sugiru's body dead, they would have to make it happen, and Itadori made that clear while laying out the plan. Kenjaku's death was the priority, but killing him alone wouldn't resolve the problem with the culling game. Itadori needed a way to end the game without unnecessary bloodshed. Of course, he wouldn't hesitate to eliminate vessels and rogue sorcerers. Still, Nanako seemed uncertain, but with a sigh, she nodded. "No, it's fine." In the end, this wasn't about whether she could or not. She had to. Itadori was sure Kenjaku would eventually come to Jujutsu High in search of Tengen, so Nanako and Mimiko needed to be ready to act when the time came. Additionally, even if they failed, Itadori wouldn't let Kenjaku do as he pleased. At the very least, he'd delay him long enough to intervene. Teleportation was more of a contingency plan, but with his mastery of projection sorcery, Itadori was confident he could reach the scene before Kenjaku escaped. Still, he preferred to avoid Yuki's death, so he hoped Nanako could pull off the teleportation. "If that's all, you can rest in any available dormitory." With a nod, Itadori turned and spoke before walking away. "I'll join the culling game soon. Kenjaku will attack sometime afterward, so be prepared." Seeing the girls nod, he walked away, leaving them alone. Once Kenjaku was eliminated, there wouldn't be many obstacles left. Yuram was strong, but at this point, far from a threat to Yuji. As for Sukuna, there wasn't much the King of Curses could do. By devouring the fingers cautiously, Itadori ensured Sukuna couldn't take over. Furthermore, Itadori was confident that within a few months, he'd be able to take on a 15-finger Sukuna. But even if Sukuna somehow broke free, Itadori doubted he could win against Gojo and Yuki. In fact, Itadori believed Sukuna couldn't even defeat Gojo alone. Feeling a strange sensation, Itadori paused, narrowing his eyes as he sensed Sukuna attempting to manifest. "Huh. Looks like he somehow felt I was underestimating him." Shrugging off the attempt, Itadori continued on his way across the campus. "Well, it doesn't matter. Hey." As he seemed to head toward his room, he stopped when a voice called out not far away. Turning, he saw Maki approaching him. "I was looking for you," she said authoritatively, her serious expression making it clear she wanted to talk. "Let's train." "No," Itadori misunderstood, it was even worse. "All right." But he didn't refuse. Even though Maki was on an entirely different level now, he wouldn't decline a training session. He just hoped she wasn't planning to take out her frustrations on him. In tense silence, the two made their way to the training field, arriving quickly. Maki wasted no time grabbing a wooden sword, and with a sigh, Itadori picked up his own. At the end of the day, Maki was a warrior. If she had something to discuss, what better moment than during a fight? But noticing the hilt of her wooden sword cracking under her grip, Itadori realized she had a lot to discuss. Boom! Raising his wooden sword, Itadori gritted his teeth as he blocked a crushing blow that pushed his feet into the ground, both wooden swords shattering with the single strike. Damn! Itadori smiled as he saw the broken swords. Leaping backward, he assumed a defensive stance. She seems really upset. Watching Maki's oppressive aura explode from her body, Itadori sighed, realizing he was about to be used as her outlet. But if she thought he'd simply take the hits, she was sorely mistaken. He never held back with her before, and that wouldn't change now. He'd give it his all. Maki dashed forward with explosive speed, reaching Itadori in an instant and landing a punch on his forearm with such force that it sent him flying across the field. The young sorcerer landed firmly and prepared himself as Maki continued her relentless advance. Itadori narrowed his eyes at her swift movements. Her increase in speed was surreal, and he began to understand why Toji was so feared. Fortunately, his recent experiences had trained him against fast opponents, so he had no trouble dodging when Maki threw a punch his way, though her lack of full control over her physical prowess almost sent her tumbling. Recovering quickly, Maki spun around to charge again, only to be caught off guard when a sweeping kick sent her flat on her back. A heavy knee pressed into her abdomen, pinning her down. While Itadori's raw physical power couldn't yet match Maki's, his cursed energy enhancement put him close enough to restrain her with difficulty but not impossibility. Gripping her arms and slamming them into the ground with enough force to crack the surface beneath them, Itadori resisted her attempts to break free. "You seem upset," he remarked with a small smile. Maki glared coldly, continuing to struggle against his hold. But as he tried to speak further, his eyes widened in surprise when a foot wedged into his underarm, sending him flying with a powerful kick. "Stop paying attention to me," Maki said irritably as she stood, immediately charging at Itadori. "And focus." Boom! Reaching him, Maki surprised him with a leaping kick that struck his defense hard enough to embed his feet into the ground. Gritting his teeth as his arms trembled, Itadori didn't retreat. He quickly grabbed her leg and hurled her away. Spinning mid-air, Maki landed gracefully and turned to continue her onslaught. What? But when she found nothing where Itadori had been, she narrowed her eyes, her instinct screaming at her to move. Hesitating a moment too long, she clenched her teeth as a punch landed squarely on her face, making her stagger. Her eyes shifted to see Itadori beside her. "If you need to vent, I won't deny you." Grabbing her elbow as she tried to retaliate, Itadori held her firmly, meeting her gaze. "But just know that." Before he could finish, Maki surprised him with a headbutt to his nose. His vision flickered momentarily as blood trickled down his nostrils. The sudden attack disoriented him, giving Maki the perfect opportunity to sweep his legs out from under him, slamming him onto his back. Straddling his abdomen, she pinned his arms to the ground. Itadori sniffed. Even though he'd taken plenty of serious damage since arriving in this world, blows to the nose still hurt like hell. Being hit with such force only made it worse. That was unnecessary. "You wanted to talk, didn't you?" Maki asked with a smug smile. It seemed that the earlier headbutt had relieved some of her irritation. "I'm all ears." Itadori stared at her for a few seconds before his gaze drifted downward, noticing the rather unusual position they were in. It was undeniably an odd setup for a conversation. All right. But he didn't complain. If this was how she wanted to talk, he'd respect her wishes. "Don't try to keep secrets, Tengen." In the Master of Jujutsu's temple, Yuki and Tengen sat face to face as the special grade sorceress served herself tea from a pot. The surrounding space was enveloped in an endless white void, but the small area where the two conversed resembled a traditional room. With a deeply suspicious expression, Yuki questioned the person before her bluntly. "What did you want with Yuji Itadori?" The boy's disappearance may have been ignored by others, but Yuki did not trust Tengen as they did. She had been immediately suspicious, sensing there was more to it than simply delivering a warning to Itadori. Thus, she was direct with her question. At this point, there was no reason to keep secrets, as that would only breed unnecessary distrust. Something they could ill afford amidst the chaos caused by Kenjaku. Tengen did not answer right away, folding her arms across her chest and letting out a sigh. There was no reason to keep secrets now. It was clearer than ever to Tengen that this would be her eventual fate. Whether Yuki agreed or not, it didn't matter. I asked him to use his curse technique to consume me if things escalated. Yuki's eyes widened at the response, narrowing soon after as she quickly understood its implications. Don't tell me. Yes, he will replace me. Yuki stared at Tengen for several seconds, narrowing her eyes further before downing her tea in one swift gulp. So that's it, huh? Question mark. Tengen raised an eyebrow at her. You fail and decide to pass your curse onto some poor boy? Why? Because you're tired? After forcing your sins onto children, now you want to force another child to take your place? Tengen felt the weight of those words and, though she knew there was no way to defend herself, tried to respond. I didn't. What is it? Are you going to use some excuse about destiny, or claim that your enlightenment led you to this conclusion? Is this a joke to you? After using innocent children to prolong your life, do you really think I'll agree to this? I won't let you off the hook. Tengen pressed her lips together at the sorceress's words. Moving her hands to the teapot, she poured herself a cup and, surprisingly, drank it all in one go. It's already decided, even if you disagree. If Kenjaku reaches my body, he will win. Yuki stared at her for a moment before a sigh escaped her lips, a sign of her frustration. We won't let it come to that. No one wanted it to come to that, but unfortunately for Yuki, she wasn't the one who would decide. Maki had never felt this way before. She knew her anger at seeing Yuji and Mai together was irrational, but it was something she couldn't control. She wasn't clueless, she understood what it meant to be attracted to someone. Even though much of her time was spent training, she had grown up as a normal girl. Sure, childhood stories about falling in love weren't the most reliable sources, but they were enough for Maki to at least recognize what was happening within her. The tightness in her chest, the heat in her face, and the irritation toward Itadori. It was obvious, she liked Yuji. A new, almost invasive feeling, one Maki had never experienced before. Of course, she knew what it meant to care about someone, she had friends she deeply valued. But, this was different. That's why she was so upset when she saw Itadori and Mai together. That's why, when she realized her position with him in the middle of the training field, she felt so flustered. Clearing his throat, Itadori caught Maki's attention, who seemed lost for a moment. Can we talk properly? Maki stared at him for a few seconds before moving away and sitting on the ground, a faint blush rising to her cheeks. Thank you. Itadori expressed his gratitude, sitting down and holding his nose, relieved it wasn't broken. First of all. Turning to Maki, Itadori surprised her by bowing slightly. I'm sorry for what happened earlier, and I'm sorry for destroying the Zenin clan. I know you wanted to lead it someday. Maki blinked, feeling a bit guilty over the apology. While she was frustrated with Itadori's involvement with Mai, the boy had risked his life to face an entire clan for them. Her anger seemed even more irrational now. No. I'm grateful. You saved Mai, after all. Maki sighed. I wanted to prove myself to those fools, but I see now that it wouldn't have changed anything. In the end, I was chasing a childish dream without considering reality. Maki. Itadori called her name with confidence. You were already better than that bunch of idiots. They were just too stagnant to see it. Besides, I'm sure you could take them all down by yourself now if you wanted. Maki smiled, looking away as she propped her arm on her knee. I know that. No need to flatter me. Itadori laughed at her attempt to brush off the praise. Standing, he stretched his arms briefly. Well, how about you focus on controlling your newfound strength before acting so confident? Maki observed him for a moment before giving a confident smile. Is that a challenge? Oh, you think I'm the one challenging you? Arrogant. With a single motion, Maki got to her feet, her fists clenched tightly enough to cause a loud pop. I think I should knock some of that confidence out of you. Itadori smirked, letting cursed energy surge through his body. Last I checked, I was ahead in wins, so. Spreading his arms in provocation, Itadori smiled confidently as cursed energy wrapped around him like a cloak. Bring it on. Amid a blood-soaked scene, seated on his throne of bones, the King of Curses watched the interaction between the two teenagers with a trace of irritation on his face. His initial plan had been to take over the boy's body while he was saving the girls, but that had proven impossible. Yuji's defenses were strong, and Sukuna realized it was impossible to gain control unless the boy allowed it. This was increasingly frustrating, and if that wasn't enough, the boy's rapid growth was another factor to consider. Looking upward, Sukuna frowned as small cracks began to form in the barrier of his innate domain. That brat. Clenching his teeth, a vein bulged on his forehead. I'll make you suffer for this, boy. With his eyes emitting a murderous glow, Sukuna seemed resolved on his next move. Those cracks symbolized nothing less than mockery of the King of Curses. Itadori was attempting to demonstrate superiority, showing that eventually, even Sukuna would be powerless to stop him from accessing his innate domain. A space meant to be accessible only with his permission. Itadori was slowly breaking through the barrier dividing his soul from Sukuna's. And that was the ultimate insult to the King of Curses. At the entrance to the Tomb of the Star Corridor, just before the elevator leading to Tengen's sanctuary, Itadori could be seen standing in front of the cursed item warehouse. The boy appeared deep in thought, his unease evident in his expressions, with his face momentarily furrowing before returning to normal. Indecision was what Itadori was grappling with at the moment. After weighing his options, Itadori decided he couldn't afford to take risks against Kenjaku. To ensure the curse user wouldn't feel comfortable in his fight against Yuki and Choso, Yuji concluded that overwhelming him with powerful opponents was the best course of action. While Choso and Yuki were strong, with the latter truly capable of defeating Kenjaku if he faltered, the false Geto was too cunning to rely solely on their current strategies. He needed the two to hold out until he arrived. Facing a worn-out Geto would be ideal, given that the original battle would leave him significantly weakened, but Yuji didn't want to sacrifice Yuki to achieve that. Thus, the more allies to support Yuki and Choso, the better. This was why he stood before the warehouse. Unlike the original Itadori, who would consume the remaining death paintings, the current Itadori had no desire to devour his siblings. He wanted to free them. His decision was made, but why, then, was he still hesitant? Essentially, it was because, with just a glance, he could see how fragmented the souls of the death paintings were, most likely due to their being mere fetuses imprisoned for so long. Creating individual bodies for each of them was impossible in this state. With such fragmented souls, they would be incapable of sustaining a body. Embodying them wasn't a viable option either, as it was impossible to predict how deformed the body would be or how their cognitive senses would be affected. Moreover, even though Itadori didn't mind capturing a death row prisoner to serve as a vessel, there was no way of knowing how the mind of such a vile criminal would affect his siblings' thoughts. For this reason, Yuji's best option seemed to be to merge his siblings' souls into a single body. Merge wasn't exactly the correct term, as a true merging of their souls would result in rejection. Instead, it would be more like a glue binding their souls together in one body. This would resemble Mahito's technique of fusing souls with minimal rejection to form a powerful body, but with adjustments to allow the cursed fetus's souls to share rationality. As a strange and novel concept, it carried risks. But if this was the best way to free his siblings, then Itadori saw no reason not to pursue it. Lightly touching the warehouse gate, Itadori pressed his lips together as he felt the blood in his body pulse, as if guiding him to find his imprisoned siblings. This familiar sensation was comforting. Even while retaining little rationality, the cursed fetuses seemed to somehow express affection through their blood-soul connection. It was as if they were making their concerns for their younger brother clear. But at the same time that they radiated affection toward Itadori, the boy could sense the anguish his siblings felt. Being imprisoned for so long, it was only natural they harbored indignation. A burning rage toward the one who had placed them in this situation. Even without words, they could somehow convey their collective desire for vengeance against the one who had desecrated their mother. They wanted Noritoshi Kamo dead. And that made Itadori smile. Swinging the warehouse gate open, he revealed countless cursed objects collected over the eras of Jujutsu society. But despite their allure, they didn't catch Itadori's attention. His focus was solely on the end of the corridor, where the cursed fetuses were lined up. "Don't worry, brothers." Feeling his blood guide him, calming the closer he got, Itadori let cursed energy flicker around his hands like flames. "I won't let you sit idly by while everything unfolds. It's time to set you free." Near the gate of Jujutsu High, Maki was packing a few items into a backpack while Itadori observed her with an interested gaze. Not far from them, he could see Geto's two daughters chatting with Mai, which was quite surprising, actually. He liked seeing them get along, but it wasn't something he'd expected. Not long ago, the two had tried to attack all non-sorcerers. Seeing them, who shouldn't care for non-sorcerers, getting along with Mai, who wished to be one, was truly unexpected. "I guess it's like what happened in World War II, where countries that didn't get along united against a greater evil," Itadori murmured while rubbing his chin, narrowing his eyes for a moment as he wondered if that was the best comparison for the situation. Shrugging, he returned his attention to Maki, who had finished packing her backpack. As the one capable of freely passing through the culling game barriers, she would distribute information, as radio signals or any form of satellite communication didn't work within the barriers. She would also carry some cursed tools if needed and serve as backup for anyone in need. Itadori had also specifically asked Maki to search for Yuram. Letting the King of Curses assistant scheme freely wasn't a comforting thought. As for danger, even if she wasn't entirely accustomed to her new strength, Itadori doubted Yuram could kill her. At worst, Maki could retreat. Yuram wouldn't be able to keep up. "What are you thinking about?" Blinking when Maki's voice interrupted his thoughts, he turned to see her sitting beside him, one eyebrow raised briefly before a small smile spread across his lips. "Curious to know?" he teased. "Maybe." But Maki didn't take the bait, merely relaxing beside him. Itadori chuckled at her response, noticing she'd reverted to her usual demeanor after their training session. They hadn't properly discussed what had happened between him and Mai, but Itadori made no attempt to hide or avoid the topic. It was clear to Maki that he didn't feel bad about it or think he'd done anything wrong. Thus, Maki saw no reason to press the issue. If that was what the two wanted, then suppressing her feelings, she decided to set her jealousy aside. Though she hadn't spoken directly to Mai about it yet, Maki wanted the best for her sister, and if Mai liked Itadori, she would support them. "Just thinking about our options." But Itadori, unaware of what Maki was thinking, had different thoughts about how to resolve this issue. "For now, our focus is saving Tsumaki, but Kenjaku will attack soon, and that will need to be our priority. Is he really that strong?" Maki hadn't witnessed Kenjaku's power during the Shibuya incident, so she was quite curious about this curse user capable of body hopping. Faced with the question, Itadori crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes closing to indicate deep thought as memories of his confrontation with Kenjaku surfaced. Sukuna and Sensei are in their own league, but I'd say Kenjaku is just below them. Maki blinked at this information, absorbing it for a moment before being genuinely surprised. Being second only to the King of Curses and the strongest sorcerer was no small feat, I see. He's strong, but if we overwhelm him, I doubt he can hold out. Maki nodded, adjusting her posture and stretching her arms. Her gaze shifted to the sky for a moment, noting how the late afternoon approached, signaling she should leave soon. Stay alert. We don't know which curses Kenjaku has unleashed in the colonies, Itadori advised. Standing, he began walking toward the school's entrance. I'll join Megumi and the others. Meet us in about a day. Maki followed shortly after. Stopping in front of him, she stared at him for a few seconds, an action Itadori noticed. Even though they'd partially resolved things, there was still tension between them. Their relationship may not have been romantic before, but it was slowly evolving into something. Avoiding the awkward atmosphere after recent events was impossible. But Itadori wasn't an inexperienced youth. He acted on his will and understood the consequences of his actions. He also knew exactly what he wanted. At this point, romance was the last thing they should worry about. But if there was one thing sorcerers lacked, it was a perspective for the future. Itadori saw no reason to shy away. I like you. Maki blinked, her mind taking a moment to process his words before surprise shone in her eyes as she looked at him with a hint of astonishment, a rare expression for her. But seeing her react like this, Itadori didn't falter as he held up her backpack, offering it to her. I won't say what I did was a mistake because it wasn't. I like you, Maki, but I also have feelings for your sister. She took the backpack as he continued seriously. You won't hear me making excuses for it. I don't know what you think about this, but I believe we'll have time to figure it out later, so. Stepping closer, Itadori pulled her into a hug. Caught off guard, Maki took a moment before embracing him back. Good luck, and take care. Stepping away, he smiled at her. And to the astonishment of the three spectators watching from a distance, a faint blush appeared on Maki's cheeks before she nodded and turned to leave. Idiot. Itadori watched the girl walk away for several seconds, but as soon as he felt a few burning stares on the back of his neck, he turned around to see the three girls failing miserably at pretending they weren't watching. Narrowing his eyes, he sighed in defeat the moment he noticed a small smile on Mai's lips. What am I getting myself into? Rubbing his forehead, he made his way to prepare for his own departure. In his own room at the JujutsuGuy facilities, Itadori organized some books on his bed with an impassive expression, his eyes narrowing as he rubbed his chin thoughtfully. After visiting the warehouse where JujutsuGuy's entire arsenal was stored, Itadori took the opportunity to grab some interesting books he found while rummaging through the numerous cursed items. He was particularly intrigued by the books containing information about barriers. Judging by their covers and the archaic writing style, he discerned that these were very old texts, perhaps 500 years old or even older. With just a cursory glance, he noticed that most of the books contained valuable information that could greatly aid his improvement. Since he didn't have the time to absorb all the knowledge from the books, he manipulated his own body to create two clones of himself, one capable of using cursed energy and the other not. The clone without cursed energy served the purpose of allowing Itadori to read through the book's contents, while the second clone was a safeguard to protect Mai and other girls in case Kenjaku unleashed curses on the school, potentially even stalling the curse user until his main body could arrive. This should do it. He nodded in satisfaction as he examined the clones. Guide the girls if they need help teleporting me. Otherwise, follow the initial orders. The two clones nodded, and Itadori turned and left his room, closing the door behind him with a sigh. If everything went as planned, Kenjaku's defeat was imminent. Pseudogeto might be powerful, but Itadori doubted he could stand against them. Itadori knew that it would be nearly impossible for Kenjaku to escape during the fight, especially with Tengen assisting them. Yuji only needed an opportunity to expand his domain, and the advantage would shift entirely in their favor. As for Sukuna, the King of Curses had been silent for a long time, not even attempting to break free during this period. Strange, indeed, but Itadori wasn't overly concerned. With his vigilance, Sukuna was unable to take control. Still, he felt he shouldn't lower his guard. Sukuna wasn't the King of Curses for nothing, and if any opening arose, he would undoubtedly exploit it. Itadori. Blinking as a voice called out to him, Itadori turned to see Mai approaching him quickly. He couldn't help but feel a little confused seeing her. Their relationship was awkward at this point. Itadori could see that she liked him, and as he told Maki, he had feelings for Mai as well. But it was still a little strange when considering the bigger picture. He liked Maki, but he had ended up sleeping with her sister. He might have been an experienced man in his previous life, but he had never been involved with two women simultaneously, so this kind of drama was new territory. Mai. But if there was one thing he knew he needed to do, it was to clarify everything. He wouldn't reject Mai because he had acted knowingly and intentionally. But without properly talking to Maki, he didn't want to move anything forward. Just as he was about to speak, he was caught off guard when Mai grabbed his shoulders and pulled him into a kiss, taking his lips anxiously as she drew him close. Itadori was initially bewildered but soon reciprocated, pinning her against the wall and intensifying the exchange, a line of saliva connecting their tongues as they pulled apart. "You want to talk to my sister when we have time, don't you?" With flushed cheeks, she spoke, their faces close enough to feel each other's warm breath. "My sister is a complicated girl and might take a while to figure out what she wants. Maybe I'll have to help her with that, but as for me, I know exactly what I want." Leaning toward his ear, she whispered in a way that sent shivers down his spine. "I want you." Itadori was stunned for a moment, his eyes blinking rapidly as he processed those words. This was definitely a determined woman. Well, what kind of man would he be if he didn't respond appropriately? After bidding farewell to Mai and the others, Itadori didn't waste time leaving Jujutsu High. His body moved at an extraordinary pace, so fast that he appeared as nothing more than a blur, barely noticeable to ordinary people. He knew that at this moment, Megumi and the others were somewhere in a parking lot located in Tochigi Prefecture. A reasonable distance, but one Itadori didn't see as a problem to cover, thanks to projection sorcery. "I haven't tested my limits yet, but considering that Tochigi Prefecture is about 100 kilometers away, at this speed, I can get there in 30 minutes, he muttered, maintaining his pace as his eyes narrowed while he increased his speed, noticing that he had reached an even greater velocity. "Maybe 15. He smirked smugly. Naoya simply hadn't done justice to his own technique. If he had been less arrogant and trained to reach the peak of projection sorcery, Itadori doubted it would have been so easy to take him down. But that didn't matter anymore. The technique now belonged to Itadori, and he would make sure to show the world its full hidden potential. Ring! 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 Itadori abruptly stopped as an alarm suddenly rang out, his eyes narrowing as he turned alertly. But when he saw a small creature with a skull-like face and tiny wings flying toward him desperately, he observed the situation with curiosity. You were too fast. I could barely keep up." The strange Shikigami spoke in an exhausted tone, panting as if it had tried to match the young sorcerer's speed. "How can it be sweating? It doesn't have skin." Itadori narrowed his eyes at that but decided to let it go. "I don't remember its name, but it should be the one that acts as the mediator for the culling game. In any case, a player added a new rule to the culling game," the Shikigami announced after catching its breath. "Rule 9. Players can now see information about other players, including their name, points, number of rules added, and colony of residence. Oh, if I remember correctly, it was Kashimo who added that rule. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I'd like to face him, but if he finds out I'm Sukuna's vessel, he'll definitely come at me with everything he's got. It wouldn't be an easy fight. Well, no matter. Itadori shrugged. While he felt tempted to steal Kashimo's technique, the ancient sorcerer was skilled and powerful. Even if victorious, Itadori doubted he would come out unscathed. Moreover, his primary goal was to create rules that allowed for an exit from the culling game. Besides saving Tsumaki, this would also be crucial for him to return to Jujutsu High. But still. Finding something odd, his eyes landed on the small Shikigami staring silently at him. Why am I already considered a player? Did Sukuna make a vow with Kenjaku in the past? Then why is my name being used instead of his? Itadori was puzzled, his mind sifting through his memories of the plot as he searched for an answer, failing when he couldn't recall any mention of this. That's strange. He murmured but shrugged it off when he concluded that it didn't matter at the moment. Anyway, what's your name? The Shikigami suddenly perked up, seemingly excited that someone cared to ask its name. Kogain. It's Kogain. Kogain. Itadori repeated with a nod. Alright, explain the rules to me again. I'd also like to know what kinds of rules conflict with the main ones. Sure thing. While Itadori studied the rules a bit more, deep within his soul, where a demon resided, Sukuna rested his chin on his hand with a slight smile. The boy is clever, I'll give him that. Sukuna nodded, despite feeling a bitter taste in his mouth from the praise. So it seems my suspicions were correct. Kenjaku really did this. How unpleasant. When Itadori arrived at the parking lot where his companions were supposed to be, he felt confused when he didn't find any of them there. Fortunately, before leaving, they had left behind a letter detailing their next steps. You're taking too long, so we decided to start moving. I'm heading to Tokyo Colony 1 with Nobara. Panda and Hikari are heading to Tokyo Colony 2, and Todo and Kirara have gone to Aomori Colony. Come as soon as you read this letter, don't delay. Megumi. He sighed in relief after reading the letter's contents but couldn't help feeling annoyed by Megumi's impatience. Luckily, the plan hadn't deviated from the canon, as the sorcerers were still heading to the same colonies, even without information from Kogain. Things could have gotten complicated if Hikari had decided to go to a different colony, forcing Itadori to face Kashimo to earn his points. Kogain. Calling for the small creature, it didn't take long for the skull-faced Shikigami to appear, radiating excitement. What is your question? Itadori shrugged at the creature's cheerful demeanor. From what he had noticed, treating Kogain kindly was enough to gain some appreciation from the Shikigami. Which colony has the fewest points accumulated? That would be the Osaka colony, with approximately 160 unclaimed points. Itadori rubbed his chin thoughtfully. 160 points wasn't a value to ignore, considering his goal of creating a rule allowing entry and exit from the colony's barriers. While discussing the rules with Kogain, he had realized that the culling game didn't prevent players from leaving the barriers. Instead, this was a limitation imposed by the barrier system itself. The only rule was that players could earn points only within the colonies, and they remained participants, still subject to the rule that failure to gain or spend points within 19 days would result in the removal of their curse technique. And how many sorcerers are in that colony? There are 30 sorcerers. Itadori grinned at the answer. 30 sorcerers could yield 150 points. Assuming some of them weren't hostile, he calculated he could still collect at least 100 points by defeating the dishonest ones. Many incarnated sorcerers and even newly awakened ones had an insatiable desire for battle, and Itadori had no qualms about giving them a fight before taking their points. For now, however, this was a plan for the future. He needed to help Megumi first. Itadori doubted his companions would face death if they encountered Higuruma, but if their cursed energy was confiscated, they would struggle to win. Besides, he wanted to talk to Higuruma. Back when this world was nothing more than fiction to him, Higuruma had been a captivating character. Yuji wanted a face-to-face conversation. Alright, thanks for the info, Kogen. Thanking the Shikigami, Itadori watched it vanish, radiating satisfaction. Alright, time to move. Nodding to himself, he let cursed energy flicker around him briefly before vanishing without a trace of his presence. In Tokyo Colony 1, where Megumi and Nobara had just entered and declared themselves players, the dark-haired sorcerer found himself irritated as he spotted a woman with hair resembling a scorpion's tail. Damn it, I didn't think entering the colony would separate me from Nobara. Clicking his tongue, he watched the strange woman rub her cheek in pain. He didn't feel bad about it, though. After all, she had attacked him the moment he appeared on the street. He had merely retaliated, and held back only because she was a woman. Why did you do that to me? She asked innocently, as if she hadn't initiated the attack. You attacked me first. I only defended myself, Megumi replied coldly, his eyes narrowing at her behavior before he turned forward. Kogen. The Shikigami appeared almost immediately. What is your question? Good, I can get information whenever I need it. With a cold gaze, he requested a list of the game's rules. His brow furrowed in interest as he noticed the addition of a new rule allowing players to view each other's information. Kogen. The Shikigami perked up at his call, ready to answer any question. List the players with the highest points in this colony. Megumi waited a few seconds, his eyes shifting between the Shikigami and the woman, always keeping his guard up against a possible threat. But as soon as Kogen provided a list of all the colony's players, Megumi turned to the woman coldly, his blade still in hand, ready to retaliate against any attack. Do you know a sorcerer named Higuruma? Elsewhere in the colony, Nobara walked through the empty streets with a toothy grin, her hammer dripping blood as it swung in her hand. Idiots. She muttered irritably. Trying to sneak up on me like that, I should have finished the job. Her irritation stemmed from being ambushed the moment she entered the colony. A pair of fools had tried to knock her out with a blow to the head. Luckily, her training sessions with Itadori had toughened her against such attacks, and she quickly smashed their faces in with her hammer. She had felt like killing them on the spot, but their pitiful begging had drained her of the desire, leaving only her annoyance as she set off to find Megumi. Where the hell did that idiot go? On top of a building, a woman with long, light-colored hair gazed at the landscape, irritation etched on her face. After hours of waiting, she still hadn't spotted any new targets. Her subordinate and companion, Amai, had also failed to locate any new players. Known in regular games as the Rookie Killer, she had taken up this role in the Culling game to avoid direct confrontations. She and her ally had devised a risky strategy to eliminate inexperienced players unfamiliar with cursed energy. It had worked for a while, but with fewer new players appearing, accumulating points was becoming increasingly difficult. Waiting annoyed her. Perhaps she should just kill Amai for a few points. No, the boy was somewhat attractive and still useful. Of course, if they couldn't gain points for too long, it might become inevitable. But for now, she preferred to wait. I should just go to sleep, she yawned, stepping toward the edge of the building. Her hair transformed into a jet engine shape. It's getting late. As the turbine-like hair roared to life, preparing her to leap. Swoosh. A strange sound cut through the air, drawing her attention upward. Something was flying toward her at incredible speed. What? Before she could react, a tremendous force struck her, rendering her unconscious as her body slammed against the building's edge. Oh. Landing firmly on the rooftop, Itadori observed the scene with a hint of awkwardness before regret flickered in his eyes. That wasn't my intention. Using flame jets for propulsion is still new to me. He muttered to himself since the woman was completely unconscious. Anyway. Setting the matter aside as he confirmed she was still breathing, he moved to the building's edge and scanned the area, spotting numerous cursed energy signatures below. His gaze focused on a man with propeller-shaped hair flying toward him. I intended to analyze the situation, but it seems I have a problem to deal with first. Who are you? What did you do to my woman? The man shouted angrily, but Itadori remained unfazed, sighing deeply. Swoosh. The man closed in quickly, but as he ascended, his eyes widened in shock as intense heat surged toward him, instantly stopping the propeller on his head. What? He exclaimed, stunned, looking up to see his propeller-like hair cut into pieces. Oh, crap. Realizing his predicament, he could only stare in terror at the pink-haired boy before plummeting to his death. All right, problem solved. Shrugging, Itadori didn't bother confirming the man's fate. Now I can analyze the situation. Boom. Rinamai flinched as Haba suddenly crashed into a car below with such force it was clear he couldn't have survived. Approaching the wreckage, Amai confirmed the man was lifeless before nervously looking up at the rooftop where Haneu had been. What was that? He whispered, awestruck. Killing someone at this point wasn't as impactful as it used to be. Itadori didn't even flinch as he sent the man with strange hair plummeting to a fall that would undoubtedly kill him. Knowing the man, along with the unconscious woman behind him, had been killing unsuspecting newcomers caught off guard by the random teleportation, Itadori was also in too much of a hurry to waste any words. 10 points have been added. Itadori nodded as Kogain appeared and announced his point increase, raising an eyebrow when he noticed the woman he had struck was no longer breathing. He stared at her for a few seconds before shrugging. Even though they were people, in Itadori's eyes, they weren't much different from curses. After all, with a quick look at the player's information, he knew the two had killed civilians. In the culling game, it was kill or be killed, but there was no real need to rack up points, as staying alive only required changing one's score within 19 days. Most players were simply killing indiscriminately. Civilians or sorcerers, they saw them only as points to collect. Itadori had no mercy for these types of players. As far as I remember. Moving to the edge of the building, he analyzed the view for a few seconds before focusing on a distinctive, flashy building. Higuruma should be in a theater. The area covered by the barrier might have been extensive, but there weren't many theaters scattered across the city. It wasn't hard for Itadori to map them out and pick the most eye-catching one among them. Even if his guess was wrong, it wouldn't take more than 5 minutes to check the other buildings. As for his companions, turning to search for his teammates' cursed energy signatures, he narrowed his eyes as he failed to sense them. It seemed they were quite far apart, likely at opposite ends of the barrier. That was troublesome, but Itadori wasn't worried. After all, Megumi was stronger than his original counterpart and could overcome Reggie without much trouble. As for Nobara, even if she faced an exceptionally strong opponent, she could still escape. But that was unlikely, as from Itadori's recollections, the best players in the colony were concentrated in Reggie's territory, working for him. So it looks like I'll be having a chat with a lawyer. Itadori rolled his shoulders, shaking off the tension. In my previous life, I never got along well with legal folks. Looking down, Itadori didn't hesitate to leap from the building, his body enveloped in flames as he sent a pillar of fire toward the ground to slow his descent. Let's hope this time is different. Landing firmly, he immediately began moving toward the theater. Itadori didn't have a systematic plan for dealing with Higuruma. If possible, he wanted to resolve everything through conversation. However, If things escalated into a fight, he'd have to knock some sense into the lawyer. Higuruma's domain wasn't seen as a threat. Itadori doubted the lawyer's domain expansion was more refined than his own, even with monstrous talent. So, excluding the sentences, Higuruma had nothing else that could threaten him. Here we are. Stopping in front of the flashy, bright building, Itadori observed its exterior for a few seconds before nodding in confirmation. He could clearly sense traces of cursed energy throughout the building, which wasn't surprising, given that Higuruma, based on his points, had likely killed at least 20 players. What absurd talent, he thought. If he didn't have a technique that allowed him to copy others, he might have felt indignant at how ridiculously talented Higuruma was. Having him as an ally is essential. Wasting no more time, he entered the building with calm steps. Where could he be? As he scanned the theater, his search abruptly stopped when he reached the stage, his face filling with confusion as he saw a man lying in a water-filled bathtub at the center of the stage. I used to do that when I was hungover, but in the middle of a theater. This is weird. Approaching, he stopped when Higuruma turned to look at him. Who are you, and what are you doing here? The lawyer asked with indifference. Actually, never mind. Have you ever taken a bath with your clothes on? Yes. You have. Wait. You have? Higuruma looked perplexed by the straightforward and sincere answer from the young boy, turning toward Itadori with mild interest. What did you think of it? Itadori rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Well, it gave me a sense of freedom. It's quite pleasant, actually. The two stared at each other for several seconds, Itadori finally breaking the silence. You never tried it before? No. Higuruma sighed as he glanced at the ceiling. Lately, I've been trying new things, especially those that seemed wrong. He rubbed his forehead with a hint of frustration before turning back to the boy. Am I going through a midlife crisis? Are you over 40? No. Then I don't think so. They stared at each other again, but this time, Itadori had already moved to sit on one of the theater seats. The conversation between the two was odd, but Itadori couldn't help finding it amusing. It felt like talking with his friends during a late-night hangout when everyone was sleep-deprived. Most things didn't make sense, but it didn't matter because they just wanted reasons to keep talking. You're Higuruma, right? Deciding to bring up his true objective, Itadori asked as he relaxed in the theater seat. Damn, these seats are comfortable. They're made that way to avoid upsetting the rich folks' backs. They're the ones who frequent this place, after all, Higuruma stated while scooping some water to wash his face. Makes sense. Itadori nodded seriously, as if the information was truly important. Anyway, you have 100 points, don't you? Higuruma played with the water for a moment before turning to Itadori with a neutral expression. And if I do? Well, then I'd like to make a request of you. What kind of request? Higuruma raised an intrigued eyebrow. You see. Sinking further into the comfortable chair, Itadori crossed his arms with a serious look. I'd like you to create a rule that allows players to share points. Itadori stared at Higuruma again, the lawyer's deadpan eyes watching him silently as he seemed to ponder his words. And what's the purpose of that? Itadori nodded, satisfied. It seemed his more relaxed approach had made Higuruma more inclined to listen, which was a good sign for solving problems diplomatically. Hooray for diplomacy! Innocent and defenseless people are participating in the culling game. We want to remove the necessity of killing to gain points. That way, those who don't want to fight won't be forced to kill, leaving only the bloodthirsty to continue. Higuruma rested his arms on the edge of the bathtub, looking at Itadori with curiosity. That's a noble reason, but... Itadori showed little reaction as a powerful intent erupted from Higuruma. There's always a reason behind a person's actions, so, kid. What's your true motive behind this? Itadori smiled at that. This was why he hated lawyers. Some of them could tell when someone was withholding their true intentions. Having their analytical eyes on you was uncomfortable. Well, since you insist on knowing. At this point, lying would only create more distrust in Higuruma, and seeing how the lawyer's mental state wasn't in the best condition, Itadori decided to rely on honesty to resolve the situation. The Cullen game is nothing more than a ritual that serves as the starting point for something that will put everyone in the country at risk. I'm part of a group trying to stop that, and removing the life or death aspect of the game is crucial to achieving that. I see. Higuruma nodded in understanding, igniting a spark of hope that he might agree with Itadori. But I refuse. As quickly as that hope ignited, Itadori felt it extinguished in an instant by the lawyer's blunt response. So that's how it is. Itadori sighed, seeing Higuruma nod to the question with marked indifference. Look, laws are powerless, but the rules of the Cullen game aren't. With the power I've been granted, there's no need for endless processes leading to a flawed resolution of a case. If someone breaks the rules, they're punished according to the laws of physics. It's wonderful. Itadori scratched his ear as Higuruma began his monologue. I got lost at the powerless part. Removing the kill or be killed requirement diminishes the weight of the rule's punishments, and I still want to see the removal of techniques in action with my own eyes. So my answer is, I refuse. I understand. In truth, he hadn't stopped to reflect on whether Higuruma's words made sense or not. Sorry, then, but I'll have to change the nature of my previous request. Higuruma raised an eyebrow as he noticed the ripple of cursed energy emanating from the boy, a frustrated sigh escaping his lips. Higuruma. Letting cursed energy dance around his fists, Itadori stood up from his seat with an indifferent expression. You're going to let me use your points. Ugh. Higuruma groaned as he stepped out of the bathtub, water dripping from his soaked clothes as he adjusted his tie. Hey, have you ever killed someone who annoyed you? With a small amount of cursed energy accumulating in his hand, Higuruma grabbed a gavel as a strange shikigami with stitched eyes appeared behind him. Domain expansion. As cursed energy erupted from Higuruma's body in all directions, his ever-impassive face shifted to one of surprise just as he was about to close his domain barrier. Domain expansion. Right in front of the lawyer, he watched the boy clasp his hands together as an enormous amount of cursed energy engulfed his barrier. Deadly sentencing. Hunting territory.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.